All right, you're recording.
Okay, thank you. This open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the August 26th meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee at 7 p.m. I am Narissa Wallen, Chair of the Triton Regional School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Erin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Goldner?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Maureen?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Caitlin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paulise?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Linda?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Mayette?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Tina?
I'm here and I can hear you.
And thank you. And Kaylee?
She's driving.
Yeah.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Superintendent Brian Forget?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Kim Croto?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. School Business Official Kyle Warren?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Special Education Director David McGee?
I am here and I can hear you.
Thank you. High School Principal Patrick Kelly. I know he's here somewhere. There he is.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Athletic Director Tim Alberts.
Present, and I can hear you.
Thank you. And I think that's it. I got everybody right. I believe I did. All right. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All right, and I will read aloud the district vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. All right, thank you all for coming tonight. I know this is, we actually had a 2-week window off, which is unheard of. And then I know all of you have sat on subcommittee meetings over the last 2 days. So I appreciate the time that you've spent with that. I just have one quick remark before we move on into the agenda tonight, which is a lengthy one, but I'm hoping it will move relatively quickly. And that is that there's a subset of the committee that has been working on the metrics. I had been hopeful earlier on that we'd be able to bring those to the meeting tonight, but we're still kind of incorporating feedback on those. So my anticipation, I'm anticipating bringing that to our next meeting. Toward the end of the agenda, we'll get on to an interim meeting date because our current next meeting is the 9th, and I think that's too late. I'd like to propose one in between, but we'll talk about that when we get to the next meeting dates at the end of the agenda. That said, I'm going to open it to oral communications from the public. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public, the meeting host muted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so, either by raising your hand on your video call, using the raise hand option on the participant screen. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public comment policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you have finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. I'm going to quickly read aloud the oral communications. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes unless extended at the discretion of the chairperson. All right, so that said, I will open it up for public comment. Let me grab my my stopwatch real quick. All right, and the first hand I see up is Darcy McDonough. Darcy, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm
Okay.
Darcy McDonough. So I'm here to talk about fall sports and why we should be playing fall sports in the fall. So I've been a part of the Triton Girls soccer program since I was little, since we've been playing Magna Ball at Pine Grove. So it means a lot to me. It means a lot more than just a game. I think I can speak for almost all of the fall student athletes coming into this. For the Triton Girls soccer team, it's been like there's some people I've been playing with for 11 years on this team. And to me, the Triton Girls community is a family more than a team. So we've been, like, as soon as the fields opened up in June, we've been practicing 3 times a week at 7:30 for an hour and a half. And at every single session, we've had about 15 to 20 girls. So I know that we're ready to play. We just want to get the green light so we can continue becoming a family, becoming close, making lifelong friendships. That's what it's all about. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Emily Johnson.
So, hi, my name is Emily Johnson. I'm going to be a senior this year. I play field hockey for fall sports, and like Darcy, I'm also going to be talking about why I think that fall sports should happen in the fall. And personally, I've been playing field hockey since SES had a little program in the 4th grade, so this is going to be my 9th year. And just like Darcy said, the girls at field hockey have been working literally all summer to get ready for this. We had kind of a rec league program going on. We've been going to workouts every Tuesday and Thursday morning. And we're also kind of just like a family, like Darcy said. And I think fall sports is playing in the fall means a lot more to us as being able to be together for one last year. I know I speak for the other 4 seniors on field hockey, where we've been looking forward to the season our entire lives, getting ready for senior night and getting that last game under the lights. And I just think it means a lot to us. And it's also a lot easier to play field hockey in the fall when it's warmer than the winter, when every time you hit the ball, your hands feel like they're going to crack because they're so cold. And that's really all I have to say on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, apologize, that wants to address the committee? Christine?
Hi, how are you? So I guess first I would want to just thank everybody on the board for the excessive amount of work that you've had to do since March. It is definitely no easy feat, and not at all what any of you signed up for. So as far as sports, I have a child going into sophomore year as well as one into 8th grade who have always been involved in sports since they were little kids. And I don't think there's anybody on the board or elsewise that would argue over the benefits that there are to kids' involvement in sports. So my only real thing that I wanted to implore and get out today is that when MIAA comes along with their final rules, decisions, alterations of what these sports seasons could look like if we go forward to play, that instead of looking at it as too daunting or too expensive or too hard, that we really take the time to go over it, to have subgroups, have each team involved, have parents, players, boosters club, see how we can make it happen instead of quickly dismissing the logistics of it being too hard. Let the sports bring it. let us do a lot of the work for you. You don't have time to necessarily look at all these different angles. But I know from the parent point of view, the boosters, the kids, you have a whole tribe of people that be willing to help, whether it's time, financial, planning, figuring out what we can do to make this happen. It's more than just a sport. It's more than just a season. It's a life that these kids have built and worked on. They're losing so much already, and I just don't want to see them lose anything more. So that's basically it. I just really hope that the board will allow the outside in and have everybody really have a say and really work together under the mission of making it happen.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm assuming it's Martha. It's listed as Tetra's iPhone.
Hi,
Yes.
Narissa, it's Martha.
Hey.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right. So you guys are back at it again tonight, and I do want to first say thank you very much because I know you all know I'm in the thick of it with you every step of the way. I really just wanted to take an opportunity to give you a little more insight into what my summer was like. It was slow to begin with, but then it was really phenomenal for the state of New Hampshire to allow different sports events up in New Hampshire, full-fledged tournaments, where I'm talking probably 40, 50 teams over the course of, 2 days. And so for lacrosse, it was incredibly well run. Everybody had their temps checked when they walked in, not the parents, but everybody wore masks. Everything I wrote to you really did happen. I wasn't just writing it to make you think like it didn't happen. Everybody wore the masks. People were socially distant. It was terrific. There were no issues whatsoever. He played in 4 lacrosse tournaments in 4 different locations in New Hampshire, and not a single situation regarding COVID transmission has occurred in any of those events. So it really is going to come down to protocol. And the weird part for me attending was, I know that there were also softball tournaments and there were field hockey tournaments. And the irony was those tournaments were held with different guidelines and protocols. Lacrosse actually had the most stringent in terms of everybody wearing masks, including the kids when they were on the sidelines and everything, and the coaches. But even through the checkpoint, softball and field hockey did not. They were able to walk in and out and walk around, and they have had no issues of transmission at all. The hockey thing is one that I know I talked about, excuse me, in the email. And the one in Salem was run really well. There were 0 issues. So it really comes down, I talked to people up there. I've talked to my AD in Methuen, and some other people, and basically he has, talked about how what they're working to do is take the information that is provided by the state on what the requirements are, and the different sports subcommittees are making decisions on how they want to manage things. So for example, I know volleyball is not having anybody in the gym other than the participants. We're lucky in Methuen that we have Huddle, and so all the parents can watch on Huddle live. So that works out. But those are some of, I think, the creative things that I know parents would love to step up to the plate and help our district out here in Triton. If those are things that we need to do some fundraising to get things like that in our district for the kids and the parents. I understand that we may or may not be able to help out with other situations in checking kids in buses, but I do ask you to really consider what those kids talked about tonight and the value and what it means for them to be able to play sports. I think it's critical to their emotional and mental well-being. And I know I said that before about just being in school with the hybrid, but it is really important. So I thank you very much for listening. The only other thing I ask is, I know I threw this on the table the last time. I would love to ask you guys, don't go 4 weeks, go 3, maybe 2. I wrote that in my email, but I'm throwing it out there live for the reevaluation. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Narissa, can you hear? Can everyone hear me? Can everyone not hear Narissa? All right. I'll go next on the list. We'll go to Peyton Gibbs.
Hi, I'm Peyton Gibbs, and I'm going into my sophomore year this year. And I think, as well, like Darcy was saying, that soccer and fall sports in general has been something we've all definitely been looking forward to, especially since playing in youth soccer. We've all been a really close, like she said, family. And I think another thing that we haven't really talked about is mentally wise. I think having something to look forward to after sitting at a desk all day and knowing that there's something fun to do and people to interact with, I think will definitely be a huge thing. I would also like to thank you guys for all putting in such work to make this all happen. And, so I just think that if fall sports can happen, I think we're all willing to, have things modified and wear masks and do what we have to do just to have something and know that we have something to look forward to. Thank you. That's all I have to say. So thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, Peyton. Narissa's still not there. I'll keep going down the list. I think next was, it's just Alyssa. I think I see you there with your hand raised, Alyssa.
Hello, I'm Alyssa Mullen, and I also am on the girls' soccer team. I'm going into my junior year, and a lot of my best friends are going to be seniors this year, and I've been playing with them for so long, ever since I was little on the team. And it would really suck if I couldn't, if it'd be my last season with them and we wouldn't even be able to play. And, there's going to be obviously modifications, and the MIAA is going to put in rules, and they're going to modify it so it will be safe for the community. And obviously, if people would like to opt out, they should have the option to. If you want to play, you can still play, but if you would like to opt out, you can. So I feel like that would be beneficial to people's mental health. And if they also have family members at home, they don't have to play. They can protect their family and the kids that would like to play for their mental health and just to let off steam, because that's the only way they can. I feel like they should be able to do that. And so that is the only point I had to make. So thank you for listening.
All right.
That is it.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
All right. So I see one more. I see Shauna McGee.
Hi, can you hear me?
We got you.
All right. I just want to qualify this by saying that I'm both a teacher and a parent in the district. None of my my children will be involved in middle school or high school sports this year, but they all play town team sports. And so if we're letting our younger children play town team sports, I don't think it's fair that we don't allow the middle and high school students not to play. Both of my sons played baseball this summer. Thank God. Thank God. It was a lifesaver. And I can't imagine with them having to be home all day on the screen all day. I know we're going to try to minimize screen time, but we know that they're going to be on the screen a lot. These kids are going to need an outlet. And like all the students have said so far, it's more than sports. This is, these are friendships. These are lifelong friendships. I know my kids can't wait till their hockey season starts. They're chomping at the bit. So I feel for these middle school and high school students who play on their school teams. I can't wait till my kids get to their high school teams. I think it's hugely important for social and emotional well-being. And if we're going to allow and recommend kids to be in Y programs as daycare, it doesn't make any sense that we would say no to middle and high school sports. Thank you.
Thanks, Shauna. All right. I saw Narissa was back somewhere. Where did she go?
Do I have audio?
There you go.
No? Yes?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Jennifer?
Hi, yes, my name is Jennifer Mullen, and I am a parent of 2 girls at Triton, one in the middle school, one in the high school, who play sports. My concern is if we don't go through with what the MIAA is telling us or asking us to do with the guidelines, kids are going to go up to New Hampshire right over the border. I've already been offered spots on my daughter's club teams. If there's no high school sports, all the kids are going to be playing the club leagues or just taking teams and going elsewhere, which could actually end up being more chance of contracting the virus, because you don't know what the guidelines are in New Hampshire. At least if we followed the MIAA guidelines and they were more strict and stringent, there'd be maybe less of a chance of contracting something. So I already know of summer leagues from Triton that have gone up to New Hampshire, such as basketball, and I'm not sure if there's any other ones through Triton, but my daughter was on one of those teams. So they're going to play regardless, whether it's for club, whether it's teams going over the border. These kids need to play, and kids that are really into sports are going to find a way. So I'm just really hoping that Triton finds a way to work the MIAA guidelines out, and hopefully we'll have a chance to play in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak during public comment? Sorry, I'm scrolling through the screen just to make sure there's nobody on video that I'm not catching. All right, so it looks like a no, so we're going to move along. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'm going to read aloud the donation. To receive a donation from Stop and Shop, care of Crane Communications, Inc. in the amount of $103.44 to be used for students at Salisbury Elementary School at the principal's discretion. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Maureen. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Is that Linda?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And any discussion?
Marissa,
Yep.
I've in the minutes on June 17th, under the section 9 in the student advisory report, my last name is spelled incorrectly.
Okay, so we will amend that. I'm looking. Sandy, can you take?
There's 2 T's in Abbott.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. A motion to approve as amended then. Maureen, can I get a
I'll make a motion to amend it with the correction of Kaylee's last name.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I need a roll call vote to approve, please. Aaron?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Lees?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you. All right, moving on to the student advisory report. Kaylee, do you have one prepared for tonight? I know you didn't send it ahead of time, and if you don't, no pressure. I know you're technically on summer break.
I did not write a report for tonight because I haven't had the general consensus from the student body. However, I have had a large influx of people speaking and questioning whether or not extracurricular activities will be occurring, in what regard they will be occurring, and a lot of questions regarding the music and arts department in correlation with sports. A lot of people would like to be able to see if Triton allows sports, Triton to also allow the arts and other extracurriculars in as safe as a way as we can possibly do so. Thank you.
All right, thank you. New business? Any members want to raise new business? Seeing none. Moving on to reports and deliberations. Item A, reopening of schools, update and further discussion. Superintendent?
So I think, I know there's a lot of people listening and wanting to talk about athletics, and it's not the first bullet underneath there, but there are 4 pieces of guidance that I do just want to review with you, give you some quick updates in regards to where we are. So why don't we start with athletics? I think that makes the most sense. And I'm going to hand it over to Patrick and Tim. Patrick Kelly, the high school principal, and Tim Alberts, our athletic director. The Cape Ann League, has been working together to make a decision. And so I'd love to have you hear directly from Patrick and Tim. And I'm not sure if you two have tag teamed and who wants to share first. I see Patrick unmuting.
I am muted, but I can let Tim start as the athletic director.
Thank you, everyone, for the time. I appreciate it. I know, there's been many hours spent over the summer and well beyond the job description, so I appreciate it. I've had the pleasure of speaking with many students and families, most recently in regards to athletics, and it just reaffirms how lucky I am to be a part of the community. How everyone has been respectful. There are no right answers, but I think it's healthy conversation, and it's refreshing to see how much athletics and extracurricular activities means to the school community. As Patrick said, just in the last week, there was joint guidance released on sports seasons for the school year 2020-2021. Joint guidance from the MIAA, which is the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, and DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Within that, sports were labeled low risk, moderate risk, and high risk, and also levels were defined, levels 1 through 4, in terms of how safe certain sports are. There was a COVID-19 task force that worked extensively over the summer. It was a nice cross-section of over 25 administrators from around the country, or around the state, ranging from superintendents to principals to athletic directors, medical doctors, coaches, officials. So they worked tirelessly to get us to where the recommendations are. As students and families talked about, organized physical activity should be encouraged, but we want to make sure that everything is clear and everything is safe. And, it's my job to have those parameters to make sure that everything is keeping everyone in a safe environment. I could speak on and on about how important athletics and extracurricular activities are to a school community. In terms of that, there's been guidance from the EEA, and more is to come. As it stands right now, a few sports have been determined safe to compete in games and competitions interscholastically with no modifications, and those are golf and cross country. A few sports have been determined that they will not be able to participate in games. And the MIA adapted and created a fourth season, a floating season, if you will. And competitive cheerleading and football were the two high-risk sports from the fall that were placed into that floating season, given everything right now. Right now, sport committees around the state are meeting to talk about how the different sports will look. We heard from a lot of girls soccer players tonight. Soccer is going to look very different than what we're used to. So those sport committees are meeting, and they turned in their recommendations to the state just yesterday on how they can play those competitions in a safe manner to keep everyone safe. The next step is on September 1st, the MIA and the Sport Medicine Committee for the MIA will implement those modifications. So as it stands right now, there are a few fall sports. We really don't know how they're going to look. Field hockey, volleyball, soccer. We don't know how those sports will look. So it's hard to say. But at the last MIA Board of Directors meeting, they did discuss that those health and safety precautions will be approved, and the sports will just have to be modified. So certainly there aren't going to be groups of students that are going to be playing a contact sport in a similar manner. That just wouldn't be safe. So sorry if that was a longer answer, but athletic directors in the league have been communicating pretty much all summer. Most recently, principals in the Cape Ann League have been meeting as well. And, just to kind of hear everything out, brainstorm, there was a lot of information to take in, almost 10 pages, and each sentence, has a lot of logistics involved and can be interpreted in different ways. So it's been very healthy. We're part of a great league where we want to keep everyone safe, and we certainly want to try to make it happen as best as we can. Patrick, if you want to jump in, or
yeah, I'll jump in. So as we met the other day, I think there were a number of different parts and facets of the discussion that came up. We spoke about the potential for what a all league schedule could look like, what it would look like if it was everyone participating, what it could potentially look like if it was just the schools that were starting in hybrid participating, and what it would look like if it was some combination of the two. We also spoke about concerns in terms of facilities, given some of the guidance that we've already received. The use of locker rooms is something that would be, relatively problematic. The increased transportation costs, would be problematic. We'd be most likely having increased transportation costs, fewer games or matches, and the same user fee. So thinking about some of the equity there, what we might need for event staff at games, whether or not, one of the hot topics is whether or not we allow for any spectators at games during the course of not just the fall, but, considering the, winter season going forward after that. Especially where winter season, much of it's going to be indoors in confined spaces. How we look at managing that. And then just trying to start thinking through some of the logistical hurdles that are present there. And so I think there were a number of different pieces. There's clearly the issue of health and safety and wanting to make sure that our student athletes are safe, wanting to make sure that our coaches are safe, wanting to make sure, quite frankly, that our community members are safe. I know one of the major concerns for some of the districts, and it's a concern that I would share, is that we in playing interscholastic athletics, we start mixing cohorts of students from various towns, and that becomes potentially problematic. We're trying to make sure that we're mindful of our own towns and our own statistics, but this, when we open it up, would require us to be really vigilant about every other town in the Cape Ann League statistics and where they're trending. And there was discussion about whether or not the metrics that are used in the state map in terms of us being in a no color zone versus a green, yellow, or red zone or community, whether we consider those as metrics around safety. I think there are parts of that make sense, and parts of that are flawed based on sample size and community and what else might be prevalent. One of the major concerns that we had as we were talking about reopening schools was around testing availability. And I think that was something that was still part of the conversation with principals, and athletic directors were beginning to unpack some of that as well. So I think there were, as we started the discussion the other day, I think the hope was that the league would be able to come quickly to kind of a universal place. And I think we saw in relatively short order that the communities from across the league were in large part in different places. And sometimes athletic directors and principals were in different places. And I think that's something that's going to make it challenging for potentially a universal league-wide decision. but the conversations and discussions that the athletic directors were having will continue to have, and that the principals will be having with them, will certainly help to provide guidance as to whether or not we feel like, from my perspective and Tim's perspective, it's safe and effective to move forward with athletics. Ultimately, it'll be a decision that rests with school committee, but we certainly would like to help guide and inform that decision. I think at this point, there's still a lot of work for the athletic directors to be doing. They still wanted to really unpack that information that they're going to get at the start of the week, and really focus on the health and safety data that's going to come out of the MIA coming up soon. Tim, did I characterize everything from that meeting?
Yes, even better than I did.
I was going to say, just clarify timelines. So in regards to the Cape Ann League coming forward with a recommendation on a modified schedules and what that would look like and all the various facets of that, the expected timeline would be, fill in the blank.
By September 1st, we'll know what all the sports will look like.
Okay.
Sport committees in the state will be modifying those sports and to determine, can they be played at a interscholastic level and how does that look like? So that information will be released statewide on September 1st. I think once we see that, then we can, better look at how that looks and, analyze it and discuss it further.
Okay. So we're not, just to make sure we're clear, we came in hoping we would be in a place to hear more from the Cal. The Cal would be, to Patrick's point, the Cal would be a little more unified, and we'd be coming forward tonight to say, here's a recommendation. I think there's still, as you said, Patrick, there's still work to be done. So, and I don't know if we talked about a meeting again next week, Narissa, or if that's another discussion, but the potential of meeting next week, I think we would take this week by week and hopefully be able to make a decision and a recommendation to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, do you, Patrick and Tim, are you open to taking questions from the committee, I assume? I hope.
Yes.
Yes, all right, thank you. Paulise?
So, Tim, just a question on the sports of field hockey and soccer. Are they looking at modifying the rules so that in basketball you've got a clock shot, you've got to shoot within such amount of time? Would they propose something like a pass clock so that the player can only hold the ball or the puck for a certain amount of time, and that would make a faster game like European hockey where there's no check? Are they thinking of along those?
Oh, we just lost your audio, Paul. Tail end of it. Oh,
I think we
now you're
just
back.
lost. Yeah.
I lost the tail end, but I think I got the gist of it. Good question. I don't have privy to that information. I have heard bits and pieces. I think for a sport like soccer, some of the modifications will be in terms of how you play defense. Obviously, the objective is to take the ball away. And moves like shoulder-to-shoulder contact, slide tackling, those will be most likely taken out of the game to make it safer. Other modifications might include no throw-ins, so students aren't picking up the ball and then touching it. Also corner kicks. If you've seen a corner kick, it's an offensive kick where a majority of the players are in the offensive goal area to try to score. Which obviously creates social distancing problems. So taking the corner kick out of the game will make it safer. Throwing the ball in, you can't throw it into the net area. So it will be more kind of possession, more passing. In terms of field hockey, I've heard rumors of maybe limiting the amount of players on the playing surface and making it a 7-on-7 game, which would certainly spread out the field and make it more socially distant. So I think each sport is coming up with new modifications. I know Coach Colbert is on the call, cross country. You know, how you start a cross country race is going to be different. They're going to have more staggered start times, more heats with less students. So we'll socially distance students 6 feet apart. And the finish line will be more width to it. So students have a safer area to cross the finish line. So literally every sport, volleyball as well, you know, they're coming up with those modifications, and you know, it's a team of MIA liaisons, EAA, medical advisors, athletic directors. So it's a good cross section, and you know, I'd like to think it'll be much safer than the traditional way we view those sports.
So Tim, I just have a follow-up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is a play out of our playbook, okay? And it's this: don't rely on Maya, don't rely on EEA. I need to have you go forward and come up with a protocol for us at Triton, because we've been waiting for the state all summer and DESE to give us guidelines, and they come at the last minute. Okay, so if you wait for those people, all I'm suggesting is if you can go forward and effectively come up with a plan for field hockey, a plan for soccer, you know, that will help get the kids out there, I would strongly recommend that. What do you think, Brian?
I would say that I am a fan of taking matters into our own local control. I would say MIA is a little different in that it's going to dictate the competitors, and it's our league. So that's a little different than waiting for, I mean, we have DESE's and EEA's recommendations. Now it's about MIAA making changes. So I think it's a little different, but the concept I agree with, right? We move forward and we have to, you know, maintain compliance with the league to remain in the league. But I do, the notion of us of taking local control and making what works for us is a good concept. Absolutely.
There's part of that we're already undergoing, that the athletic directors across the league are already undergoing. So they were going to come up with, you know, a transportation proposal and transportation potential costs based on the number of games played. You know, if we were to run a league schedule, and what that would look like, so they could present that to principals and school committees. They were also going to start looking at facilities assessments to look at, you know, if we're not utilizing locker room spaces, how do we get the kids ready to participate in either a practice or a game after the end of the school day. You know, what does it look like in terms of our staffing concerns to either have people, you know, present at events or not present at events? What do we need for additional staffing there? So I think there's the piece, Paul, around how the games will be played. And then there's also the piece of how we run the events and move people from one place to another. And I think that's the part that athletic directors were planning on starting on first, was kind of the operations side of it. And then they were going to second start looking at how we actually play the games, if that is a decision we were to make.
Marissa, can I make one more comment? One more question?
Absolutely.
Then I'll stop, I promise. It would greatly assist us. We hear from all these parents about wanting to make sure the program goes forward besides the kids. Transportation is a huge issue for us, okay? If the parents would step up and take care of the transportation side of it, that would give us a greater ability to do things financially.
I think, well, I was just gonna say, I think we need to have conversations about that, because I think there's usually some liability involved on the district too when we put transportation back on parents. So that's probably part of a larger discussion, not a something we can ask right now.
There's a liability issue there, but there's also an equity issue in terms of who's able to come and who's not able to come and get themselves there. You know, that was something that we started speaking about. You know, one of the suggestions that one of the ADs made in our meeting was around having games on the weekends. You know, and we talked a little bit about the equity issue of students who may or may not be able to either get themselves to an event at a neighboring district, you know, or you know, who might not be able to come because their family doesn't either have transportation to get them there, or or the family might have to work on the weekend and not be able to get them there at that point in time. So, those were some of the things that we discussed around the transportation issue. So there's definitely, it definitely helps if we can have families help with that, but there's the equity piece on the other side that I think we have to contend with as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Paul, did you have anything else?
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you. Maureen?
Okay, well, Paul touched on one of my questions, which was busing, but it sounds like there's still a lot to kind of figure out there. I wanted to, where's my list here? I wanted to ask about, is this something that we could be voting sport by sport? I mean, you talk about how golf and cross country can kind of move forward with little modifications, but other sports like soccer, field hockey, volleyball will certainly be seeing more modifications. I mean, do you see that we would be asked to make a decision for all the fall sports, or are we going to be sort of singling out things and making it a sport by sport decision?
I can speak to some of my own thoughts around that. I take either approach. It's hard to say some are safe and some aren't, with some of the health concerns that are around this. There's, with the floating season, that it provides some flexibility, but I forget who said it. It might have been Darcy. Oh no, it was who said it? It was, I'm trying to think who said it before. One of our students talked about playing field hockey in the middle of the winter when it's cold. Certainly would be something that would be more challenging. So I think the floating season provides some hope if things move, but it also provides additional challenges to playing in the winter, because we know what it's like in February and early March in New England. That there's parts of it that I think come down to what we're prioritizing as well. And so if we're prioritizing having sports play, that also has the potential to impact the schooling side of what we do as well. And I think that's something that I really want to take into consideration as we make the decision, that if we do have an outbreak as a result of sports, it doesn't just impact the players on that sports team, but it also impacts our whole school community. And so I want to be mindful of that as we think through, every part of the decision. I think that becomes really challenging, because it could be something that, a student gets from someone in a different community, but then it impacts their team, and then potentially causes either an outbreak within our school, or causes us to have to shut down our school for a period of time. So I wouldn't want, playing sports to either delay us reopening in full, or to cause us to have to close after we have, reopened or moved to a hybrid model. So I think those are things that need to be considered. And so, Maureen, to your question, approving sports one by one is an approach that I think has some merit. There's also there's also the option for us to make a decision that goes either yes, we're going to try to do all of them, or no, we're not, because of either some of the additional factors that we're worried about, or because we're worried about the impact to schooling as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other questions, Maureen?
I do. I don't know if.
Go ahead.
You want me to just?
Yeah, we might as well handle all the ones from one member at a time, and then kind of move on down the committee.
Okay. I mean, let's see here. So Patrick, you talked about, like, if an athlete were to possibly contract COVID, I guess my question, or has there been discussions about how that would work? So say,
Going downstairs to put laundry in.
what?
That's good to know.
I think somebody needs to be muted.
I'll,
I was gonna
I'll
say.
get that. I got him.
Okay. So if somebody were to, come down with COVID, how does that affect the whole team? Does the team have to get tested? Does everybody on that team have to quarantine? I mean, a lot of these sports, certainly field hockey, soccer, volleyball, they are in fairly close contact with each other. So if they're quarantining, then it's just, I have worries about how one or two cases could really shut down, a whole school, because it could spread quickly. So I guess my question is about, have there been discussions about how you would contact trace, how that would work with teams? Would they move into practice only modes or models?
I have not been part of any of those discussions. Tim, I don't know if the athletic directors have started any of that, but I would assume that that it's a relatively safe bet to say that a team is in close contact.
Yeah, I think
from having coached, my teams were always in close contact. I think it would be hard to say otherwise.
Yeah, I think we would rely on health agents and the public health nurse on their interpretation of the definition of, close contact is within 6 feet for an extended period of time, 10 to 15 minutes or more. If it was the duration of a game, really kind of hard to separate, right? So I think it would come down to, if it like Patrick said, it would be hard to distinguish unless there was a real clear answer. Students that hadn't been in close contact, in close proximity, I should say. I think it would be pretty safe bet that the entire team would be considered close contact. Again, depending on the sport. Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, Maureen, just
Yes.
My opinion, if someone on Triton's team came down with it, I certainly wouldn't want anyone else to come down with it. So whoever the next game is would be postponed. On the flip side, if we were playing a visiting team and they reported that they had an outbreak on their team, obviously I wouldn't feel comfortable sending a Triton team to verse that team.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I also wanted to clarify some information I just keep hearing out in the community. And so I've heard several times now that, so I know there are 5 schools in the Cal that have, their school committees have voted to start remotely. So there's 5 schools making this decision, or 5 school committees. Has any of those, the other 4, made the decision yet? Because I'm hearing some people say that other schools have already decided and they're moving forward with sports in the Cal.
Not that I heard. At the meeting that we had, I didn't hear that anyone was definitively going to be ready to start at this point. So even the schools that were starting hybrid, I would say that not all the schools that are starting hybrid are guaranteed to have sports seasons this fall. And so I would say that no one has a definitive answer at this point.
I've not heard that from superintendents either.
Okay.
Either way.
I haven't heard it from school committee chairs either. I know I've asked. So.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that because it is something that I've been hearing out in the community. So I also have questions about sports fees, but I don't know if that's something we really need to get into this evening. If the sports fee would be reduced, if we're not busing. I don't know, Brian, if that's something we even want to.
Yeah, I think I would just say if we were going to put athletics together and put a program together that meets the needs, equity needs. Obviously, we have to address transportation. If we can do it for this, we could do it for the same cost. We would need assistance, right? Some people would need to choose to bus themselves voluntarily. We got to look at the liabilities and insurance, coverage in regards to that. But I think it's a pretty hard scenario to find. Actually, it's pretty hard to imagine a scenario where it's going to cost less right? So even if we just had the regular transportation, it's the extra game coverage. It's everything we're needing more coverage and more monitoring. So potentially more coaches if we're talking about the breakup of the groups and such. So I don't know how, at first blush, all of my discussions, I don't know how we would do it for less money. So it's a matter then of reducing the fees, understanding that is what would be right necessarily for parents, but that would mean an additional cost that we would have to incur at the district level and figure out how to cover those costs.
Okay. All right, sorry, I have two last questions. The first one is face masks being worn during all the sports. When I read through all the guidance, it's a little conflicting. I'm trying to understand, is every sport wearing a mask? Or it sounded like there was one example given for soccer that if there was situations where like they have to do a throw-in, they have to wear masks at that time, but I don't understand how they're supposed to be taking their masks on and off. Has that been figured out or discussed?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one.
Yeah.
The initial guidance that was released last week, the youth and adult amateur sports activities, phase 3, step 1, it gave examples of how soccer would look. And you're correct, Maureen, like if someone is making a long run down the field, they don't have to wear their masks. But when they come in close, they should be wearing their masks. But that was just the initial guidelines. What we'll see on September 1st should be an ironclad view of how every sport will look. In talking to a few folks on the sports medicine committee, I think you're definitely going to see masks implemented on the field at all times by students, coaches, officials. On a national level, it's interesting. Masks aren't required, but Massachusetts is certainly a lot stricter for good reason. So I think by this time next week, it wouldn't surprise me if masks were mandated on part of the playing surfaces.
Okay. And then my last question just has to do with the DPH's metric, the color coded by town. We're currently in a good spot, but I'm just curious if we did have cases come up in our towns, and not even necessarily in our schools, but just a handful of cases could make us, bump us into the yellow, possibly even the red. What would that do to sports season? Because according to the guidance, schools that are in the red can't have their seasons. They have to be in the floating, category. So would that just shut us down if we suddenly, our towns had to suddenly change in the DPH's metric?
Tim, I can let you answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Yes, school districts will be required to update the MIA on any changes in data. So say hypothetically, our communities jumped into the red region, we would most likely would have to shut our season down. But the benefit is that additional floating season that the MIA created, those teams could regroup and join back there. And those dates were February 25th to April 25th. So, hypothetically, say October 1st, our region jumped into a red area, we would have the floating season to fall back on.
Okay.
Can I say one? Okay, I was just saying one thing in regards to the metric, and I'm hearing a lot of people talking about this now, and actually the commissioner mentioned this. So it's a data point, right? The guidelines, as you're referring to, Maureen, speaks very explicitly. Districts designated at red, must postpone their entire season. There's some discussion about the interpretation of being in the red, right? We've had the discussion about how easily a town can jump categories. You can go from white right to red very quickly. And if it's 8 members of a single family that went to a party, wedding in Maine, right? That's a very different thing than 8 different households. So I'm just hearing people talk, and I heard the commissioner talk about that too, that it's a data point. So when we say people moving into the red, I'm hearing more and more people talking about, not as a rule of law, but just as a suggestion, that it's multiple weeks, right? So if you blip from white to red and then you're back to white the following week, that's a very different thing. So I think there's still some interpretation with the use of that metric as a single measure. We'll just say that.
Or do you have anything else?
I don't at the moment, but I'm
okay.
She's reserving her right.
We can always come back to you if something gets sparked.
It's yeah. So, anyways, I won't hog the whole time.
No worries. Thank you, Paul Mayette.
I've just got two quick questions. The first, as I'm looking at the news, we've already seen one league move their entire season to that floating season. Is that something that is being discussed at all as a nuclear option? I know they have different metrics than the Cape Ann League does for the NEC, but is that in conversation or?
Tim, do you want to speak to the athletic director piece?
Sure. Yes, great question, Paul. The Northeast Conference announced that as a whole league, they were moving all fall sports to the floating season. The main reason was they had 4 communities that were in the red area. And I believe that was the main reason. You know, our districts, luckily in the Cape Ann League, we don't have anyone in the red.
Thanks.
Yep.
The only other question I had, and this goes back to Kaylee's point earlier, obviously sports are the first thing to begin with because it has to be coordinated with the other towns, with the league, et cetera. Is there any consideration being looked at down the line for what decisions made about sports might mean for other extracurricular activities and how to kind of equitably transfer one policy to the next?
I think we would have to consider that altogether. So, you know, and I feel like I hold myself back at times from pestering Brian too much as our walls abut each other. But that's been one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of how and if we run extracurricular activities. You know, just like interscholastic athletics, you know, the activities that we have after school, whether it's band, the marching band, or choral programs, or theater programs, or clubs, or what have you. Between those and sports, those are some of the things that our students remember the most from their experience in high school. Those are the things that turn our school into a community. Those are the things that are really, in a lot of ways, the lifeblood of a high school. And so it really does change the experience of a student significantly if we're not offering those. You know, and so I would say, Paul, that if we are offering interscholastic athletics, I think we would have to look at how that translates to other extracurricular activities. I will say that it makes me very nervous to have students in the school beyond the school day. You know, because that's a lot more unstructured time. You know, we're working through all of our protocols to make sure that the time is structured when they are in the building, you know, right up to our dismissal. And if we're then having, you know, a significant portion of our student body there past the dismissal time, you know, we no longer have the staff that is helping to oversee, you know, how students are interacting once the school day ends. You know, and so I would say that that's a concern. You know, we are trying to structure out every part of the day. We've tried to minimize transitions, minimize movement around the building. You know, really limit who people would come in contact with. Try to you know, be mindful of, you know, not true cohorts, but you know, limit the number of others that you're coming into contact with, and that's going to be one of the things I talk about later on in the meeting tonight. You know, so it does worry me that if we have a whole host of activities after the school day ends, we no longer have the staffing to help monitor that.
Thank you.
Got it, Paul? Perfect. Paul Goldner, you're next.
Couple of comment and then a couple of questions. I just want to say first, I appreciate all of the young people who came and spoke tonight. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and participating in public life is an important part of high school. So thank you for being here and talking to us tonight. I also want to say that one of the major reasons DESE told us back in June that we should try to get students back in school was social emotional health. And I said in one meeting earlier this summer that I definitely recognize that sports and theater and club life in terms of a high school, the lifeblood that Patrick was talking about, that's where students get a lot of the social emotional benefit from being in high school. So I think this conversation is really valuable, but I also have concerns because primarily we're about academic life and how do we get students back into doing academics in the building. So to that line, I guess one of my questions is how many teachers and support staff do we have as coaches for our fall teams? Do we know on that yet?
Tim, are you pulling that up?
So you're saying Triton teachers who are also coaches versus coaches or who are coming from the outside?
Yeah. How many?
Maybe next question while Tim is looking that is Tim calculating.
Do you have another one, Paul Goldner? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, go
another
ahead.
question was what you're just saying about if a community went red with whatever red means. Say Georgetown turns red and they have to shut down, and 2 days later we're supposed to have our soccer match against them, and Georgetown is moving their soccer season to the floating season, but how does that work? Would the whole league have to shut down because otherwise the matches are not going to be aligned? Like, are we going to run soccer in the fall and then soccer again in the floating season to accommodate the games that we miss for towns that had to shut down?
The sense I got, Paul, is that any competition that schools are able to do in this fall is kind of a bonus. And without statewide championships and the state tournament, which I believe was already decided that wouldn't be happening. If we were to have an unbalanced season, so be it. It'd be better than from what some of the athletic directors were saying. They were saying at least the student athletes would have been able to have some part of a season as opposed to having no season at all. So I think if Georgetown went into the red and we didn't get to play them, then we just didn't get to play them, and you go on with your season, and instead of having 10 games, you have 9 games.
I think your question speaks to what Patrick started with, hoping that going in, there'd be more of a kind of a concerted, we're all of one mind in the Cape Ann League.
And we're not
the case, right? So I think that would be the ideal and why we would hope for that. But I think it would be like everything else, Paul, it would be taken on the fly. And I would imagine then if multiple schools, right, all of a sudden we're going into the red and having to shut down, and then we could say, okay, can we agree now we've lost half of the Cal? We're going to shift the balance of the season to the bumper, so we can make that decision. But it would be based on, it would be literally decisions on the fly.
And I would say that based on the conversation, there are several districts there that very likely won't be participating at all. So, so if that's the case, then it's not that you've lost half the Cal, it's that you've lost a couple of more schools when you were starting with half the Cal.
Yep.
And Paul, just to get back to your first question, we're fortunate enough to have Triton faculty on every fall athletic coaching staff, which is great. And they account for about more than 50% of the coaching staffing for the fall. And I believe that total is 13. So.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, I have a few questions.
I don't know if you can see Kaylee's got her hand raised.
Oh, Kaylee has her hands raised. Sorry, Kaylee, go for it. Kaylee, you're muted.
I got you. You're
There you go.
muted now.
There we go.
Perfect.
So, I had a question that involved, well, it was more of a comment, but we've decided to start hybrid. So I was thinking, in my mind, it makes more sense to go in and start sports as well. Well, I mean, we've started remote, sorry about that, and choosing to go into hybrid later. If we start sports now and a few students happen to contract the virus, we'll know that we need to shut that down before we go back into the hybrid mode. And then those student athletes are also then giving it to other students who don't happen to be on their team. So personally, I feel as though it would make more sense to start that before we started in the hybrid mode, just because it will help mitigate transmission. And then there's also, I understand that we need to take as much time as possible to do this safely, but we have 21 days before the school year starts, before September 16th. And since March 13th, the only thing that the student body has really been hearing has been, oh, we'll figure that out later. We'll figure that out. We can't just keep on saying we'll figure it out, because there are 21 days left to the school year. Students don't even have schedules yet. They don't know what's going on. And people are trying to plan for their academic year, trying to decide if they need to if they have time to take that second job, that one job over the winter, or if they're going to be able to be on that sport team or join that club. So they really need to know. And I know that we need to figure this out as safely as possible. But this whole period, we have been waiting for other schools to decide first. And I know that we're doing that out of a safety concern, but at the same time, I feel as though we need to act now, and we can always realize that it wasn't the right move later on. But the inconsistency and just pushing everything back is really starting to get to people that I have been in contact with and that have reached out to me. Thank you.
I think that's totally understandable. I also think an uninformed vote could mean that we have to very quickly switch after having made a decision. I don't know. That's just my personal
I
take on that. I'm uncomfortable with uninformed votes.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would push back on, Kaylee, is the concept that we're waiting for other schools to decide. I think there have definitely been, we were deciding after other schools, but we weren't waiting on their decision as part of our decision process. That's just a sequential, that's the way it happened. We were waiting to get the answers, and I don't want to speak for any of the 9 committee members, but before you took votes, what we were hearing were you need answers to questions, and we were getting the answers to questions. So I do understand the frustration. Every day, every night that I go to bed, I just would love to think I could check a box, and there's still it's just this perpetual unanswered question since March 13th of last year. So that is a very real frustration, and I acknowledge that for sure. Yeah.
Questions from the committee? All right. So I guess I got a couple of questions there. I have a lot of them actually. So I guess one of the big ones, and I think this is a Tim question. We've heard from a number of cross-country parents, and I understand that they have limited competitors in the Cal, and that's a concern. So my question is, are there other sports? So what's the knowing that competition would be part of a typical sports season. Can you talk about kind of the limitations there for cross country, and also any other sports that would have a similar limitation? I don't know if there are others where, I don't even know what the number is in cross country, but if it's 5 teams that they actually compete against, are there other sports that have similar limitations?
Good question. The schedules that were released are pretty much non-existent now. So whatever folks were used to seeing, whatever schools move forward, we're putting together drafts of how schedules will look. So certainly, we would work together with schools. We don't want to put more scrimmages and more meets than usual, just out of safety, but certainly we want to have a competitive schedule to make it worthwhile for the student athletes as well. So, I don't have the answer for that. Once schools know who is competing, that's the easy part of the job. We can make a schedule, within a day and make it competitive and worthwhile for that team.
Okay.
Another one that might have some logistical challenges is golf. As it stands now, the first day of practices would be September 18th. You have to have 10 practice days before your first competition. So that's putting you back, to around October 1st. As you know, it gets dark before 6 o'clock around October 15th. So that would be another unique sport where we would want to, make sure that, teams that are participating in golf would have a competitive schedule and not just, one match, 2 matches, 3 matches first season. So.
Okay. Thank
Everything
you.
else would probably be about half of what they normally consider, if I was to guess. So.
Okay. Thank you. While you're unmuted, I've heard questions answered about games and gameplay, but I haven't heard a lot about the teams that are only allowed to practice in the fall season. Are there sport committees that are also working on guidelines for practice, and are they matching the same schedule as the sport committees that are working on the guidelines for gameplay?
Just to clarify, were you thinking about spring sports or winter sports, or just fall sports that aren't competing right now?
Fall sports that aren't competing right now, there were a few that were asterisked in the list.
Yep. Good question. So as it stands now, fall and cheerleading, their competitions are moved to that floating season the end of February. So this is another hurdle to kind of climb. If a district was to offer sports, there becomes a decision, and it's based on the principal level. Those teams could practice in small cohorts of groups of 10, non-contact, mostly strength and conditioning type of skill work. So that's a decision that would be made at the principal level. Otherwise, those students would be free to try out and join another sport if they so choose from the remaining fall sports that are offered. So, a cheerleader could, decline doing practice cheerleading and say try out for field hockey and then rejoin cheerleading in the floating season in the winter. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Thank you. I just wasn't sure if there was going to be additional guidance from the sports committees in addition to what was already there, but it sounds like what's there is what's there, and they would just be operating within the EEA guidelines. Is that accurate? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So there would be no pads in football. There would be no pyramids in cheerleading. It would be all socially distanced, which really means, kind of skill work and strength and conditioning type things.
Okay. Thank you.
Narissa, I think one of the things that Tim alluded to there that is probably a large part of the discussion is this whole concept of out-of-season coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And out-of-season coaching is something that's typically strictly prohibited by the MIAA. Usually there's at least a couple of coaches that you see every year from across the state that are ending up in the paper, because the districts leave them for out-of-season coaching. And it's something that the state usually takes pretty seriously in terms of a coach's ability to interact with their team outside of the season and conduct any sort of practices. That's the issue of out-of-season coaching, I think, is a bigger issue than just if we were to move forward with out of season coaching, it's a bigger issue than just one or two sports being able to participate in the fall. That has significant ripple effects, across the high school sports landscape. And that was something that as a group we talked about, potentially taking a common stance across the league. So I think that's something that we'll probably be looking at further as building principles across the Cal, because coaching definitely has significant.
Oh, we lost your, you muted, Patrick.
Yep,
There we
I
go.
just muted at the end when I finished.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. I just want to, I think it was Maureen that said it, but I just want to reiterate this idea of close contacts and hopefully getting some additional information on that, whether it's, I think I would much prefer to know that the entire league was defining close contacts the same way. And one of this is perhaps a more involved question that you have an answer to right now, but when they talk about close contacts right now, if you defined members of the opposite team as close contacts as well, because obviously even if you're not having, or won't be allowing some of that, that really, hard contact, there's obviously still going to be some close contact probably going on in some of those games. They look at actually the day that an individual becomes symptomatic and the 2 days prior to that as being the period that they look at to see who that positive individual was in close contact with. So I guess one of my questions is, in that you're saying that there would be an altered schedule, are you looking at all at setting up those schedules in such a way to work, I guess, around that day of and 2 days prior sort of structure, I guess? I'm just envisioning, a team playing twice in a week, maybe on a Monday and a Wednesday. You have an individual that becomes ill, symptomatic on Wednesday, and if both competitive teams and their own team is defined as a close contact, that could potentially be 3 teams that would be moved into isolation at that point if it was defined that way. So I'm just curious if you're looking at the schedule structure in regard to that as far as potentially setting something up. And maybe that's too in-depth for right now.
No, we're actually meeting as a league, the athletic directors, tomorrow, just to kind of go over draft schedules of what it would look like. So that's certainly great feedback and something we can work on together, but nothing has been set in stone, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, I think the decision about close contact and interpreting that is going to be perpetually brought back to the local health agent, right? So the MIA can take a stance on that, but I think that's going to default back. That's great if everyone in the MIA has the same understanding. That's a good thing. But I would
even hope the Cal had the same understanding, because if the discussion was defining a whole team as close contact, but another team that Triton competes against did not choose to do it that way, then obviously there's some significant differences in approach there that could be an issue.
Agreed. I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying I think what will ultimately happens is it's a local control. That's the local health agent's authority to determine that local or that close contact in the tracing. So certainly worthwhile efforts, but it raises another flag in regards to district communities approaching this differently could have very different and wide-reaching impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was, I guess, in regard to our meeting schedule, I was going to suggest at the end of this meeting that the school committee add another meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is September 9th, which is just a week before school starts, which is really close to be having a meeting. I was going to suggest adding a meeting on the 2nd. Are you anticipating, I know you had mentioned the 1st as a date for having the rulings from the sport committees or the guidance from the sport committees or whatever they're calling that coming out. Do you anticipate being able to have had an additional CAL discussion kind of in that intervening time, either later on the 1st or on the 2nd, so that we could have a solid informed discussion on that night? Otherwise, I mean, we may even have to look at either moving that to another date or something like that, so that we're, you know, having a decision prior to the 9th.
I can certainly check tomorrow at our League AD meeting. The timing is very tight. I wish we had another, just even one day in between, but certainly I'm always available. It's just, are my colleagues able to meet, and their school committees meet on different nights as well. But I think it would be nice to maybe shoot for that September 2nd, and hopefully, you know, the league can meet and talk about the new modifications that came about, and maybe have more consensus. But as a fallback, I think September 9th would be a good backup date, if that works.
Okay. I mean, we could even, the committee hasn't always been limited to a Wednesday night meeting. So we could potentially even look at meeting another night. I know we've obviously through this process, I think we've met Thursdays. We had one Friday afternoon set up at one point. We've met on Monday nights. You know, no, I don't want to put additional dates on the committee's calendar if we don't need to, but if we need to adjust that day, you know, we can definitely attempt to do that so that we can get the community a decision as quickly as possible after, as reasonably possible after the sport committee's information becomes available and you have a chance to discuss it. So maybe we can just stay in touch on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
I'll have a little more clarity tomorrow. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Paul Lees had a follow-up question.
Not so much a question. I just wanted to ask the committee to consider the next date being September 3rd, which is a Thursday. We've been meeting with the TRTA on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it might be helpful to meet on a Thursday. I think at that point we'd have a lot of information to bring to the committee. So just throw it out there.
Okay. We can talk about that at the end when we get to next meeting dates, I guess. Any other questions for Tim or Patrick before we move on? All right, seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time tonight. I very much appreciate all the work that you're going through. I'm sure that this is stressful for you. And I appreciate the time and effort you're putting in to make sure that we do our due diligence here and try and make an informed decision. So with that, I will bump it back to the superintendent. Are we going to move on to go back to the updated health and safety guidance? Is that where?
Yes. And I think if we continue our reopening updates, and thank you, Tim, thank you, Patrick. Patrick is also later on the agenda, and I'm wondering if it's okay with you, Narissa, if we pull his proposal as it relates to reopening, and then he can go on with the other 17 things I know he needs to do this evening. So if we can take that, and Patrick, I'll hand the reins over to you in regards to the proposal about senior privileges. So this is Annex 15 in your packet, everyone. This is agenda item.
It's 9C.
9C.
General action items.
Which is also state budget cuts.
Thank you, Brian, for asking to bump me up. I appreciate that.
Do my part, Patrick.
So what I'd like to come to propose this evening is to add additional senior privileges in for the course of the 2020-2021 school year. The specific privilege that I'm looking to put in place and enact is for seniors if they have a study hall, either the first period or last period of the day, if we're either in the hybrid model or in a full in-person model for the students to be able to leave the building or come into the building after the school day has started. So thinking through why I think the proposal has a lot of merit for this school year. So I think one of the concerns that we've had as we've gone through our reopening plans is around staggered start times, staggering entrance into the building, staggering dismissal, limiting the number of people that students are coming in contact with during the course of a day, trying to minimize some of the transitions, minimizing the number of students a teacher would come in contact with during the day. And also just thinking about trying to not have a student for us to be housing them there, rather to have them present when they're absolutely needed for the academic purposes in the academic day, and then if the time that's remaining in the day is either just studying or the time at the start of the day is for them to study, to allow them to continue to do that remotely as they've been at this point well practiced and versed in doing, unfortunately, over the last several months. So I see it as having a lot of benefit. I personally don't really like the idea of students leaving and coming back. So it's something that I'm specifically looking at the start of the day or the end of the day. When students leave and come back, it provides a whole host of other safety and logistical concerns. As a former assistant principal who had an open campus style, in a previous district, it was incredibly challenging when we had students leaving and coming back throughout the course of the day. It was much easier to manage when it was students either coming in late or leaving early. I think the idea of students driving somewhere, doing whatever they might be doing and then coming back has got some logistical flaws to it that, with my former assistant principal hat were always really concerning. But I think there's a lot of merit in this current school year for us to be considering students either starting the day late and with a staggered time in. It's not even I'm starting late, but I'm studying at home and then coming in, or leaving early and then spending the rest of their day studying at home. So I'll stop there to kind of not over talk it, as I tend to do. But my request from the committee is to have us look at considering having seniors have this additional privilege for this current school year.
Okay,
Obviously,
thank you.
Proposal was to me, and I'm certainly proposing it to you because I think it is a very viable option. And again, the key being it's proposing it for the year. If this works, and maybe there's merit in this for the future as well, but it's put it in place for the year and reassess at the end of the year.
Yeah, and my real reason for considering it is around trying to continue to look at what we can do to mitigate some of the safety concerns within the building. Wanting to really focus on minimizing contact that any student or teacher would come in contact with during the course of the day. If we can limit that by 15 people, I think there's validity to that.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Erin?
So Patrick, can you talk a little bit about how many students you anticipate this being? I went to Triton. Can you explain also how the schedule works? Because I know that there were certain periods during the middle of the day that would never end up falling first or last, so that they wouldn't be given the opportunity to take advantage of it, that sort of thing for us?
Correct. Yeah. So there'd be 4 class periods that would hit during our current schedule. So it hit A period, C period, D period, and F period. So it would hit 4 of the 7 class periods. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of how many students that would impact. Megan Ober's finalizing the schedule. We're hopeful that we're going to have schedules out to students, to Kaylee's point, within the next 7 days. Hopefully sooner than that. So we don't have the finalized number of that at this point in time. My guess is it would impact somewhere around half of our senior student body.
Go ahead, Erin.
Do you know how many of those students would have access to a car at that point in time too? Is that something that you kept track of for students that already had maybe got their license their junior year, and whether or not that would carry forward?
I haven't gone through to look at that aspect of it, Erin. I think the data in terms of who drives at times changes year to year based on availability with families. Certainly, oftentimes if a student has a car as a junior, they're still going to have a car as a senior, but that does change at times. And I think irregardless, even if it's 40 fewer students that it impacts, I think there's validity in us trying to do whatever we can to mitigate some of the contact and close proximity that people would have.
Did I answer all your questions, Erin? Okay, thanks. Kaylee?
So I was under the impression that with this, it would be that not only would you, if like you drove, you would be able to go home early or come in late, but if your parent decided to let you and like drop you off or pick you up, would that also be okay and acceptable if they had signed the form?
Yes.
That's how I was interpreting it. So
Yep. So
it's not even.
Yeah. So a parent could drop you off or pick you up at those times. We'd obviously want consent forms from parents. We'd put in place, tracking for our attendance purposes. We need to know who's in the building and who's not in the building. Any student that would either be coming in late or leaving before the end of the school day would have to sign out, because we've got to know who's in the building for accountability and safety. So if there was ever a fire in the building or something happened in the building, we need to know where every single one of our students is. And so we have to have tracking procedures along with that. So to Kaylee's point, if a student was dropped off by a parent or picked up by a parent, that would also qualify. I think we're trying to avoid students leaving together, because I think that creates other concerns. So it would have to be students that are either driving themselves or being picked up by a parent.
Any other questions, Kaylee? Was that all you had?
That was all.
More?
I was actually on the subcommittee and student council that came up with the idea, so
I'm
a little bit biased.
It's always interesting when it comes right back around, huh? Other questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the plan as presented to implement senior privileges for the 2020-2021 school year, please?
I'll make that motion.
Maureen, thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Paul Goldner. Yep. All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I need a roll call vote. Erin? Yes?
I don't know how I feel about this with the equity piece of it, telling half the seniors that they're okay to do this and the other half the seniors, they don't get the opportunity to. I don't know.
Yeah, or abstain.
I think I'm going to abstain on this one.
Okay. All right. Paul Goldner.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes.
Caitlin.
Yes.
Paulise.
Yes.
Linda. Paul Mayette.
Yes.
Tina.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. All right, so it's 8 yes and 1 abstention. Thank you, Patrick. Is there anything else you're here for? Nothing else, right? Okay.
Patrick, thank you.
Just making sure. Thank you
for being here.
Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
As well.
Okay, Brian. So are we going back to updated health and safety guidance under 8A?
Yes, and I'm going to go quickly through these.
Perfect.
I know you've had them. You've had the opportunity to read them. The memo, it is Annex, Roman numeral check, that is 18, is a memorandum jointly from Commissioner Riley and Commissioner Burrell from the Department of Ed and Department of Public Health, clarifying some things. when we had, and I couldn't even tell you the date, back in July, when we had the Newbury health agent and public health nurse come, there were some comments and references to the discomfort with DPH guidance not matching DESI guidance, and so we have gone different ways. So this memo attempts to rectify and clarify some of those things. So again, just going through quickly, the first bullet I think is an important one. It's actually redefining close contact to the strict 6 foot within 6 feet for longer than 15-minute standard. The previous for an elementary was that an entire elementary class is assumed to have been in close contact because of the length of time they're together all day, a single cohort spending 6.5 hours together. So this redefines that and actually takes away that elementary, an entire class is considered close contact. I will say I have a concern about that. I actually think the concept of 6.5 hours spent together is not insignificantly longer than 15 minutes. And so given the fact, when I think about a first grade classroom, a second grade classroom, the older grades, certainly kids are going to be better with masks, but certainly the younger elementary levels, this is going to be a process. And to state that we think that kids are really going to stay 6 feet apart at all times, when someone's back is turned and it's just natural, someone gravitates towards someone. So I personally believe that the standard as we have it written in our guidelines is a better standard to use. The second bullet there is when a close contact can return to school. So it's requiring that for 14 days after the last exposure to a person. So there was previous documentation that allowed someone to return sooner. So this is saying it's a full 14 days if you are designated a close contact. Over the page, so when a student staff can return after COVID symptoms, the DESI guidance actually used fever-free for 3 days. DPH guidance was 21 days. I believe Pam, the public health nurse in Newbury, actually preferred the DESI guidance of fever-free, this is a tongue twister, fever-free for 3 days. They've reverted back to DPH guidance, which in general, they've reverted to DPH. So it's 24 hours fever-free and also asymptomatic and the other requirements that are there. COVID-related fever, it's gone down from 100.4 to 100 even as the standard. Students wearing masks, this talks about, recommended or whenever possible. Early childhood students, where obviously you've made the decision pre-K through 12 mask policy that we'll talk about later, will apply to. Physical distancing guidelines, I don't know. I read through that and just thought, sounds like backtracking to me. But you have it there in front of you in regards to, they're basically saying, DESI recommends that the district aim for 6 feet of distance after basically saying all along that 3 feet is just perfect. So you determine what you think about that yourselves, but you determined 6 feet is the right standard, and I think you got it right. Immunizations, obviously immunizations is going to be a hot button issue as we get into flu season. There is now a requirement that's not necessarily referenced here, that all school-age students on up through college in Massachusetts have the flu vaccine unless they have a medical or religious exemption. They have to have that by December 31st. But basically this is saying all immunizations are required for all models. If you stay remote, that doesn't allow you to be exempt from immunization requirements. Medical waiting room, I'll just take you to the sentence right in the middle. Schools are encouraged to provide individual students with their own waiting room. If you're ever looking for a statement that shows the disconnect between state officials and what it means to be in working in a school, the concept of having one classroom in one space for every single student that might be symptomatic, if you're not chuckling, you should be, because there's just, what a great standard to achieve or to aim for, but it's just so beyond realistic. So certainly we're continuing to modify our COVID rooms, focusing on having a bathroom, having running water, a sink, having an open window, and then we're buying air purifiers for all of those spaces as well, in addition to all the HVAC work that we're doing. So that's just a quick run through of the changes. Again, that is really just clarifying things that were discrepancies between DESE guidance and DPH guidance. So happy to answer questions, thoughts, comments.
Questions from the committee? Maureen?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. Brian, I just had a quick question about the medical waiting room part. And I know we talked about all the PPE that we've ordered. If there are children that are symptomatic and in this waiting room, are we providing them with an N95 mask?
No.
And a non-cloth mask?
No, so we're making sure they're masked. Hang on.
So it just says student must be
surgical. It says surgical, right?
It's surgical mask. So they have a face covering, right? So it's the same.
Okay.
We have 47,000 of them, and plus we have another 7,500 youth sizes. So yeah, so it's a surgical mask. It's a face covering. It's not an N95. So we actually purchased, they're called ENVO masks, which is a certified N95 that need to be fit, and we're working with Anajakes to get all those who would need to have them properly fit. But it's a reusable. It almost looks like a respirator, and then it's got insertable filters. A little more pricey, but a little more comfortable. So we're assuming nurses will always wear those anytime they're in proximity with a suspected case. Custodians would wear those if they are cleaning up any room where a case may have been diagnosed, or if they're doing that kind of enhanced, deeper cleaning rather than traditional disinfecting, or certainly anyone that would be in close proximity with someone who is suspected of being COVID-like symptoms.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions from the committee? Kaylee?
So I have a few. The policy of when a close contact may return to school seems to negate our past story of having equal testing to me, because it said that it will be 14 days regardless of testing positive or negative. But then when it went to concerned COVID cases, it said that if they're thought to have COVID and then the test comes back negative, they can then return to in-person school. So those two sentences seem to really contradict themselves to me. So I don't know how we're going to address those two.
So the difference is if you're a close contact versus if you're symptomatic. So if you're in a close contact, right? So if I was diagnosed and you were in my classroom and we were together for 6 hours, you were an elementary student, we know you had close contact. I have an actual diagnosis. That's different than someone who's symptomatic and then proven to not, right? So they have COVID-like symptoms and then they're tested and nope, that was the flu, that was a cold, that was a cough. So that's the discrepancy between the two there.
So even if you were like close contact, thought to be asymptomatic, tested negative for it, it does not matter and you'll still be out for those 14 days.
If you are in close contact with an actual positive case, yes, you have to be out for 14 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I had a few more questions. Sorry about that.
Sure.
For the medical waiting room, have we determined yet which rooms in each school will be this designated room? And have we mapped out how close they are to the regular nurses' room / and offices and pickup spots for parents as opposed to normal classrooms? And how will the contagion room be kept in order to prevent possible transmission to other students as they pass throughout the halls?
So so yes, they've been determined. So at the high school, we were talking about the use of where the bank used to be. We were actually setting that up to be the COVID room, but actually it doesn't have a bathroom, doesn't have a sink. So students would have to leave to use the restroom. So that will likely be the kind of the wellness room. So someone who has a headache and needs 2 Advil and has a note, or someone who needs to take a medication at 1 o'clock every day. That would be set up. If you walk in there now, you'll see the windows, the bank is gone and those windows are frosted up to 6 feet. So you can't see what's going on in there. And then it will be in the nurses' suites where we'll actually use those as the nurses' rooms, as the COVID rooms. And then in each school, it's different, but it's with thought to easy access to windows, right? So the window's always open, good ventilation, again, HEPA filters, but it's the balance of close proximity to the front door or a door for pickup and out of the way of, like you said, the regular student body. so that
So
they're not walking by.
in regards to, you just gave the high school example,
Mhm.
will there be a block in between the new medical room as opposed to because that's right in the art hallway?
Mhm.
So have things like that been determined? Because I know there's a big overlap for like weird specialties. At NES, it happens to be that the like the main office is right next door to the nurse's office.
Yep.
Things like that. It
Yep.
just it worries me.
Yeah, so there's no way to keep it completely separate.
Mhm.
I think I'm
No,
understanding the
exactly.
question, right? It's minimizing. So I don't know, Kyle might be able to speak to the specifics. I know NES, you raised NES, that will
Yeah.
be a one-way hallway.
Okay.
So I think you use the term block, it'll become one-way hallways will be the way that will, again, minimize. Can't completely isolate without a separate building. But yes, it'll be the use of, traffic flow will be the way to do that. Yeah.
And then I have like two more. I'm sorry about that.
Go for it.
For the supporting the safe application of hand sanitizer, I'm not sure if we covered that one or not.
Oh, that's
It
right. I think I
says
skipped
a
this.
typical versus a non-typical it had a whole wording about like a typical versus a non-typical supervised area.
Yeah.
How are we going to determine what is a typical versus a non-typical supervised area? And does that change with age, or is it regardless throughout the buildings? Because the way it was worded to me, it brought up the like concern of students drinking the hand sanitizer, which if you've ever had to take one of the standard tests of what risky behavior you do, that all the high schoolers have to take, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And then I looked up the information for poison control, and all I could find was that drinking hand sanitizer has now it came into vogue, and they call it getting drunk on Mr. Clean's tears. Other than that, there is no information for poison control that I could find.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering what's the supervised versus a non-supervised area in
So
the words of Desi.
Yeah, so I think there's some obvious spaces, right, where people don't routinely walk through, and those are the spaces we would avoid. Obviously, there's a dispenser in the front lobby where we can see that's under surveillance cameras from the office, but certainly in the kind of less traveled areas, we would not have sanitizer. It would be in classrooms. We're going to have it clearly marked. Actually, we just got a big old pile of signs, literally sanitize here. We've got big arrows for the floor to talk about traffic control. And so it would be in those areas where those potential untoward behaviors that you described, where someone would be able to hang out and do what they want to do with hand sanitizer. So yeah.
And then, sorry, I have one last question on that front. The hand sanitizers that we got, do we have the ones that you physically have to pump yourself, or do we have the sensor ones that a lot of businesses have since gotten?
We have pumps.
Okay.
And we did that because we want it in more locations, right? So
Okay.
it either needs to be on a stand or mounted to the wall. And we went with quantity over
Quality.
Over quality, and having more of them and frequent and plenty of opportunity. Gallon-sized jugs. So yes,
Okay,
and we
thank
have a
you.
lot of it.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? All right, I just wanted to note two things that there's actually, in addition to this memo, there is an updated version of the overall infection protocols that are available on DESI's site. There is to my eyes, glaring issue that I've asked the superintendent to look at, where it says that if an individual is symptomatic, that they can either isolate or choose or get tested and continue their isolation until they're clear, or they can, or the other option says that they must get tested. It's not a choice. So I've asked him to reach out to DESI and clarify whether testing is required prior to a return to the buildings for a student that has experienced symptoms, and there's actually a list of symptoms that they have in the guidance, or whether isolation would be sufficient. Also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can report to you that I did, sorry, haven't had a chance to update you in the last 2 days, but I did speak with Desi and Anne Marie, blanking on her last name, and Russell Johnston, who are the 2 point of contacts. It was an error in the memo. So they're attempting to have language that strongly suggests, which the word must is more than strongly suggesting. I get the concept, but there is no way to require someone be tested, right? There's just no physical way that we can require that. So as you had said, if they don't get tested, then the 14-day quarantine is still the viable option.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is getting edited from what I understand. I haven't seen it edited, but that was getting updated.
I haven't been back to it since I don't think yesterday morning, so it could have been updated.
Well, in the commissioner's update, on the desktop update, linked that document. Actually, that was the first time I'd actually seen it. And it was kind of buried on Desi, and it's still linked to the wrong one. So
okay.
So
all right, good to know.
We'll see. Yeah.
And the other note is that obviously, as the superintendent talked about, this is a significant change in some cases between the previous contradictions between Desi and DPH, and some of them go in a direction contrary to what the committee had previously used in all of our FAQ and guidance, local guidance documents and things like that, and had expressed comfort in. We can, with the support of our local health departments, be more cautious than the Desi guidance. We cannot be less cautious, but we can be more cautious. So I've asked the superintendent to have those conversations with our local health departments about the potential for being more cautious around those changes in the contradictions between Desi and DPH than the direction that Desi opted to go in. So, any other comments before we move on? All right, seeing none, can we please move on to the special education compensatory services? Are you handling that one, or is Dave?
And Dave is here. Did his camera go off? Where did he go? He is here.
Sorry,
There he is. There he is.
I was standing after Zooming for 10 hours today, so.
Doing calisthenics in the background. We don't want to see that.
Yeah, no, just bracing the countertop, actually.
Yeah. All right, so Dave, you want to take us through, so this is, and again, we're not going to walk through this whole document, but I think what will actually be helpful is if Dave can just give us a high level update on our approach for compensatory services. And actually he also had what I would say a successful CPAC meeting tomorrow or last night with about 50 parents. So you can give us an update on that as well, please.
Yep. So in terms of last week, there was a call with Russell Johnston, our Zoom meeting, to go over the compensatory services. I must say, I'm not really thrilled with the way Desi coded the term. Typically, it's because the school failed in some sort of way to provide the services, where this is totally out of our control. But basically, long story short, is Desi is basically applying the same principles that we, there are two ways actually to do this. So to use the team process. So if there is a child who has significantly regressed due to the COVID situation, we can, through the team process, agree with a parent to provide additional services. And there's also a way to do it if it was just, say, maybe a minimal situation where we could agree directly with the parent to provide additional services. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is on an individual basis, and we need to get kids back into school and back into the learning process to see and to evaluate them to see sort of where they, sort of have they lost skills, which I think we all know that all of our students have either lost skills or they're not probably where they left off when they left us in March. And then there's some language in there about general education responsibility, so that if a student, so there could be some general education strategies, like there's response to intervention or some other services that could be in place for students. So technically the process has been mostly unchanged. Desi didn't really change the process. It's going to be based, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But one of the difficult, I think, conversations will be with parents is that because they were home teaching their kids for the last 4 or 5 months, parents have noticed, what they consider regression. We're going to have to evaluate that regression once kids get back, whether they're in person or receiving remote services. So, long story short, they're advising us to really follow the process that we would normally follow, except it's all based on the COVID-19 pandemic. The other issue that sort of arose, excuse me, is that there's some language in there about additional services because of the COVID. So we could have some kids return to us that, say they had a learning disability and required reading services, but because of their situation now have developed anxiety or different other sort of social emotional issues. We would need to sort of address those issues and then also add those to the IEP if it made sense. So we're not really, so as far as the compensatory services, it's really going to come down to an agreement with the school system and or parents that, number one, the services are required, and number two, how they'll be provided. So I think I don't have the document in front of me, but I think we have several months to determine that, because we can't just go on sort of hearsay. We have to have our own data and information based on when we get the kids back in school. So during the CPAC meeting last night, the topic did come up. I think most parents, it was a fairly positive meeting. I think just as we all are, people are frustrated and just want answers in terms of, schedules and services and so forth. So, but the topic of compensatory services did come up, and I just encouraged parents to reach out to me, and also, but I was hopefully clear that it would take us some time to assess students once they got back, beginning the 16th of September.
I was gonna say it's as soon as possible. CSS determinations, compensatory services, as soon as possible, but no later than December 15th.
Yeah, that's what I thought. December, yeah. Yep. But with that said, we're going to need time to assess students when they come back and sort of find out where they left off, with the data we have, and then where they returned when we either see them physically in person or through remote learning. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you. I was just going to say, questions from the committee? See any? Dave, have all the parents of the or caregivers of the high risk individuals been notified at this point?
So that's going to be most of the parents haven't either reached, have been contacted either by phone or email. We're also sending out letters. So I would say by the end of this week, parents of high needs students would have been notified. And again, one of the concerns, which I totally understand and get, is they were looking for individual schedules and when the services are going to take place. And, that's going to have to take place over the next the next week and a half or so, because one of the main challenges we have is that all of this would have been done had we had a normal end of the school year. All our transition meetings, the service delivery, the liaisons that the students would all have been done prior to the end of the school year, and would be rolling into the new school year. So again, I think there's definitely a higher level of frustration, but I would say that most people were understanding. So I've just encouraged them to reach out to the principal, the ETCs. We have agreed that we're having some staff members come back earlier to provide some extra work to try to get things, sort of try to reach out to parents prior to the beginning of the school year, because really when the teachers get back, we're going to have those 10 days of training, but that's going to be really reserved for, training and protocols and safety issues that we need to address. So we're having conversations with teachers who are willing to come back and do sort of extra work to try to get things in order before school year starts. Now it is totally voluntary. It's not something we need you to do, but most of the teachers I've talked to have been more than happy to help with that, and they would also be, compensated for their time, just because, we're already going to be behind going into the school year when we start. So we're trying to get as much done in the next 2 weeks as we can, based on people's availability and their, willingness to do. I wouldn't say willingness. Everybody's willing to help, but everybody has schedules and so forth and family issues. So.
Okay, thank you. And I know we had some on the personnel report toward the end of last year. We had some special education professionals that weren't, staying with the district. I saw on the latest personnel report that's in this one that there have been some hires for special education. Are all those positions that were empty now full, or do we still have, outstanding empty staff?
I think I would say the professional positions are full, but we're still working with IAs.
Yeah, but all those positions that you saw in June that you're referring to, Narissa,
yep.
All hires and such, those have all been replaced. Yeah,
those have all been replaced. Okay.
Yeah, but
it's not always easy to match it one-to-one when we're seeing personnel reports. So
we do it all day long, and it's not always easy to match them up. So yeah.
But there has been movement in terms of some IAs that I know that we're still trying to hire, just based on, again, either accepting other jobs or because of personal circumstances that they would not be returning. So that's certainly what we're trying to accomplish in the next several weeks.
Okay, and I know we had talked about additional PPE and special equipment that would possibly be required for special education for in-person. Is all that met at this point, so that those, I guess, are we sure? Are we, is everything in place for a September 16th? Okay.
Yes. So DESE has, in their early summer guidance, there was kind of a grid that showed, I mean, I know the committees and based on the CDC was 6 feet, but there are some kids that we already know are impossible to work 6 feet apart. So DESE had guidance that basically if those kids need closer contact, that there's more PPE needed. So I believe I saw my buddy Kyle shaking his head yes. So yes, we have the equipment.
I can confirm that.
Yeah. So that's also, something that the, there's a lot of questions from teachers, saying, well, can we wear shields instead of a mask? And well, what about barriers? But I think it's really we don't have a lot of leeway that basically if you're working with a student and you're less than 3 feet, that staff members, including therapists, teachers, IAs, are going to need to wear the full PPE required, which I know is, it's uncomfortable and burdensome, but we really don't have any room for, for flexibility at this point. So.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much, Dave. Moving on to DESE Guidance Mobile Testing Units.
Yeah, so you have that. It is Annex 21. I won't say a lot about this. I think you saw the governor's press release. What I will say is the commissioner reconfirmed today that this is a mobile unit similar to what was put in place for nursing homes where they were experiencing outbreaks. So this is a mobile unit coming from the state. The RFP is out. So they are actively pursuing. This is not just one. They'll have multiple units. But as it was confirmed today by the commissioner, this is for clusters. This does not solve our local problem about wanting to have timely, rapid testing available for our students in our community. This is not a case or 3 cases in a school. This is multiple cases in a classroom that turns into what they would define as a cluster. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of, we'd have to do that in conjunction with the local health agent in the town where the school is. And I'm sure there will be many debates with health agents who want to define a cluster as a small number, and the state is just not going to have the resources. I mean, there aren't going to be 500 of these mobile units, so they're going to be in very high demand. So it's available. We're expecting more information. There will be a metric that says this is the number. When we say cluster, we mean fill in the blank. They'll tell us what the number is and what we can expect for response times and so forth. So you have it. It's not real clear information, but it's something that's been promised. And I would say it's a step forward, right? It's definitely a positive development, but it is certainly not something that's going to solve our local questions and concerns.
And I'll just add on to that, because we were hoping that this was going to be proactive rather than reactive. And actually, the governor made a statement early on that it was going to be available to every school. And I was like, yes, this is going to be what we need. Yeah. And then it turned out to be a reactive based on a certain number of cases. But I have reached out to all of our legislators. I know that they're taking this seriously. They're pushing on DPH. To try and bring down the local testing response times. They are coming down as of the kind of round of checks that I did last Friday. They had been about cut in half from the times that we were seeing during the time that we were voting the model. So Anna Jakes was at 4 to 5 days, and Convenient MD was at 5 to 7 days. I've since heard that their Convenient MD at least is potentially coming down even farther. So they're trending in a good direction. Senator DeZoglio was able to provide an actual chart for me of the kind of overall testing responses. And you can actually see that where there was a wave where there was a significant number of tests that were taking 6+ days to return. And that seems to be tailing off now. Quite a few of them were into the 1 to 2 day times. We're definitely not seeing that here locally. My suspicion is that that's stop the spread testing sites and testing sites like Salem that are having those really short time frames. And because they're running so many tests, when you look at it as a statewide basis, it's kind of carrying the weight of the chart. And we're just not seeing it up here by and large. But they are very aware. They're talking to the Mass Department of Public Health, and those conversations will go on. I have been promised that they will be advocating for us, and I have made the case to them because one of the common things that I have heard is, well, it's the elderly that really need the fast response testing. And I've said to them, I mean, this is a situation where if there is transmission in the schools, it's going to be going to the elderly in the community. That's just the way transmission works, is it's going to go into households and can then potentially pass from households. So we're not talking about spread just in the schools that we want to stop. Stopping a spread in our schools is going to stop spread in our communities. And that needs to be a goal for us. So I think those conversations, I hope they were helpful. And I think, I think they're taking this seriously, but we have 5 legislators up here, and they're going to be a little limited in what they can do. So my hope is that they get the right ear, because I think that's going to be important. It's not just about making noise, it's about making sure that they're in contact with the right people. And I'll continue to talk to them about that, because I, really do think this is something that's going to continue to be an issue for us. So, Kaylee, did you have a question? Comment?
So I was wondering if we have any information on how long it will actually take to get a request for one of the mobile testing devices processed, as well as how long it will take for it to then arrive to the district if we're approved for it. And
yeah. I was going to say, he actually answered that during the initial press conference, and it was dependent on demand.
Okay.
So
the answer is no.
To be determined.
Yeah.
And
it's a flat no idea yet.
And then I was also wondering if it says that if you're under the age of 18, consent has to be written by a parent. I was wondering if we have thought about including a written permission form for COVID testing in the opening documents, similar to, say, the potassium iodide consent form.
It's a great question. We had not considered that, but we will consider that. Absolutely.
I think it'll be helpful. We had talked too about if we were looking at other local testing options, because we've been pinging, we were hopeful that help was going to come from the state, and then working with our local entities to see how testing partnerships could potentially look locally, and those conversations are ongoing. And that was something that I think had come up through that too. It wouldn't necessarily just be from the mobile response units. It could potentially be for something proactive if we can get something set up along that line. So, anything else on that? All right, fiscal year 21 budget update.
So can I just give you a couple quick updates in
Oh,
regards
yes, sorry.
to the opening overall? So just in regards to our plans, our processes, staff all return on Monday, right? We have 10 days of professional development. Students are returning on the 16th. We do have students returning on the 16th for the high priority students who have been designated as high priority will be in-person learning as of the 16th. We are setting up transportation for those students, regardless of whether special education or otherwise. And so we'll have that in place. We have cohorts that we finalized by the end of the week, and Patrick did allude to the fact that we are planning on notifying families next week of their cohorts, of class assignments at the elementary level, their teachers, schedules, full schedules and assignments, obviously at the high school level where you've got sections and class periods and such. So all that information will go out next week. So that is in process. I know that's a big question for families. The survey that I had sent out in regards to asking families to commit if they know that they fully intend to come back when we shift to hybrid, or if they intend to stay and select the remote option. Had over 2,100 responses out of close to 2,400, pretty good response. We obviously were asked for student names and parent names and family names, so we have that information, able to verify it. And so we are still assigning, just so that you're aware, we're not taking anyone out of the mix. So anyone who is currently on our roster and is a Triton student will be cohorted and assigned. That will make sure that when students, if and when students do transition back, I mean, I had lots of conversations with parents to say, I really don't know. I'm going to say this for now, but can I change my mind? And absolutely, right? We're trying to get a sense of the scope of the number of students who will ultimately choose that option to stay fully remote. But all of those students will be cohorted, or I should say are cohorted. And so families will be aware if they do shift back. Also families who have said, yes, we're absolutely doing hybrid, they'll know now what their cohort is. So if they're cohort A, it's Tuesday, Thursday, for cohort B, Wednesday, Friday. As obviously parents, as Kaylee alluded to earlier, people need to plan their fall and their year. So we are making progress there. Also, just in regards to negotiations, we'll have an executive session at the end of the night tonight. Another late one, sorry. But the PNN can give you an update. We're making good progress there. Will say publicly, I'm very confident we've been engaging in a very productive process. I'm thankful that everyone has engaged from the committee side, the teacher association side, so that we're going to arrive at the end, and we're not going to end in a stalemate. That's going to disrupt the start of the school year. So I'm very confident that we have a great path forward. So we are making progress there, continuing to meet again tomorrow. And then one last thing, facilities wise, we had committed to completing that full facility update. We are nearing the end, but it was a big project. And so I don't know if I would say it's taken all of Kyle's life, but any waking hour he has, if he's not actively working on it, he's thinking about it. So we have lots of different folks working on that to assure that we have all of our systems are up to date, functioning effectively, efficiently. So we are nearing the finish line on that and have made great progress. And ultimately, as you had committed the money, it was a lot of money to spend. But at the end of the day, when we open the doors, we're going to be able to say, we're not guessing. We're not making some presupposition. We're saying, here's a report that shows the level of air quality and flow and exchange, because we know that is a very key factor in keeping everyone who's in the building safe. So lots of work done and still to be done, but making great progress there. So I think that's it. Kim, Dave, Kyle, I don't think there are any major other updates. I think the key is families will be getting information next week. And I think it's probably going to end up being, the shift isn't going to be a district-wide communication now. It's going to be school by school. And we have a leadership team tomorrow, and I'm actually going to encourage principals to think of it as a series of updates, right? This isn't just I'm sending out one email with 50 points. It's just kind of a series of updates over the coming weeks as we now roll out all those important details so that families can get ready for September 16th. So any questions?
Questions from the committee? Brian, I already asked you this, but I'll ask you this in public. One of the questions that I am getting a lot is about supply lists, what families would be recommended to get for their students. Are there planners being provided like there have in past years, or will they need to get their own? Do you have any information on when supply lists will be available?
So again, that's on the topic or on the agenda for tomorrow, but I did reach out to principals today and just make that assumption. I believe the majority of them already had that ready to go, but I've been working with teachers to identify that, so that's part of that information that starts flowing next week.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Erin?
Just to expand on that, I know the supply list itself, it would be helpful if it's here's what you should have at your house and here's what you should have when we go back to school, because if we don't tell them what we are thinking about for the transition back into school, when we go to do that transition, there might not be stuff left on the shelf, or it might not be on sale anymore. So it would be good to have like those two lists as opposed to just like that here's what we're starting with on day one list.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent? Okay. Oh, Kaylee, go ahead. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to agree with Erin on that point. That would be very helpful for students. I know a lot of us are starting to stress over, on the high school level, you don't necessarily get a supplies list, but even like, what you need for certain classes. And we're starting to worry that all of the sales or all of those certain, like a lot of people color code, all that's going to be gone in about like 2 weeks with all the schools starting back. So it's definitely going to be helpful if those lists can come out sooner than later.
Yes. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none. All right. Can we move on to the fiscal year 21 budget update?
Yes.
Terrific.
So you have, it's cut off at the top. I think it's Annex 22, correct? This is actually a revised memo that was first issued back in 2009, which there's only a few of the committee members left from back then. But the basic gist is the budget state history was once the governor set the initial budget and those original regional calculations, the minimum local contributions didn't adjust. The state was very non-understanding of the fact that in a region that's important. In Newburyport next door, Ipswich or Georgetown, doesn't matter. Most towns are spending so far above their minimums, it's an irrelevant figure. For a region, obviously that's the first step in calculating for our member towns. So in a year like this year, and it's happened a handful of years since 2009-10, with the changes to Chapter 70, again, we have our Chapter 70 confirmed for the year. We're losing $68,000 from what we budgeted. In the grand scheme of things, very thankful for that figure. So with that assumed, and the changes that were assumed in that joint resolution with executive and legislative branches, so both sides of the legislature and the governor, set and confirmed Chapter 70, our minimum locals adjusted. So it's small amount of money. I forget the exact amount of money, but ultimately the decision comes down to, and what this memo says is, DESE suggests that as long as every town is paying over its minimum, that the committee not choose to reassess its member towns. You as the committee could choose to say, you know what, let's recalculate that. And I think the last say it's $15,000 that changes, and it leaves one town, and one town picks up 7,000, one town picks up 8,000. The town or towns that have the increase have to approve that increase. So I think in Desi's wisdom, they're suggesting, why would you touch that? Because once a town has their budget finalized, why would they convene a town meeting to approve an increase to a budget that's already been set? I mean, for the grand, in the grand scheme, for $5,000, $8,000, $20,000, there's just so much disruption that it causes. So when we reviewed this with the DCC, when was that? A week-ish ago. That we provided this to them and said, certainly let us know if you think otherwise, but it's been crickets, because I think everyone believes that, as it has been done in the past, I want to say it's 3 times this has occurred since 2009, that you as a committee and your predecessors have said absolutely, and the towns have said, let's just leave this one alone. We are so far above spending minimums that there's really no impact to the community. So that's that in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, can we move on to the August personnel report?
So this would normally be in my written report. Obviously, this is, we are all reopening all the time. So my report ends up being lots of other people talking about various openings. But this, you have before you the traditional personnel report that would normally be in my, at the end of my report, obviously shows all those who have left the district and all of those who have been hired. So certainly if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Questions about the personnel report? All right, seeing none. Moving on to the district communications update.
You want that one or you want me there, so?
Either way, it's fine.
I'll let you talk for a while.
Okay, I'll talk for a while. So the district communications committee met last Tuesday. It was a relatively sparse crowd, but we always appreciate having time from our town select boards and finance committees and town administrator and managers. So they received, we provided an update on the reopening of schools. There were some questions, but I don't think anything that we hadn't heard before. They're very supportive of that. We talked briefly about the reassessment, or assessment, I guess I should say, guidance that was provided by DESE. And then we spent some time on talking about partnering to improve contact tracing and how that could be done. I think I can say that there's a good understanding kind of where the gaps are now. I don't believe that prior to that conversation, there was an understanding of the magnitude of contact tracing that could be involved with schools going back in person, or the point of when that passed from our school nurses over to the part-time public health nurses. I took great pains, and so did the superintendent, to note that that we had extremely productive conversations with the health agents and the public health nurses, that they had been supportive of what we had been doing, that they are very competent in their positions. It's just that they're part-time positions that could be a problem should there be a significant amount of contact tracing with returns to in-person schooling. They require, I should say, specifically Salisbury requested a letter to be written that kind of detailed that out, because obviously not, they don't want to violate their the open meeting law by having a quorum at those meetings. So typically there are only a couple of members of each board that attend the district communications meetings. That letter was written and sent out by, I think, late on Wednesday. My understanding is that those boards are, or the towns in general, I guess, are going to be discussing that letter and those needs over the next couple of weeks, and then be able to provide us an update on that. I think I took great pains to stress that this doesn't have to be, it's not like we're asking them to increase their public health nurses to full time. This could be, in the case of Salisbury's health agent who shared with Amesbury, when there was an outbreak in Amesbury that he had to handle, it was a matter of having had people who were already trained in contact tracing who could step in at that point and help. They were not, full-time employees of the health department that were there at that point. It was additional support personnel that were trained and were brought in to support the part-time public health nurse that's there already. So this isn't a situation where we're asking them to make a hire necessarily. It's to make sure that the reinforcements are there should they be needed. And obviously we extended our offer to assist in any way that we could on that. And I think they were very receptive. I did also follow up after sending that letter to make sure that where there were chairs of boards that were not there and there wasn't someone that definitively said that they would carry it back to that board, that I contacted those chairs directly to make sure that they were had seen that letter and were aware of it, and they are all at this point. So we are meeting as a DCC again on September 1st. It's next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. So I need to reach out to the select board chairs and put together an agenda over the next day or so. And I'm anticipating that we will be getting an update at that point on kind of their discussions locally. Any questions, or was anyone that was at the DCC want to add anything to that? All right, seeing none, we will move along. Subcommittee assignments. So we had a conversation back after the election when we traditionally reorganize subcommittees. We have some subcommittees that do need to move at this point. Particularly PNN is going to have to shift. Mr. Goldner has been called to do some significant work on other negotiations as well. So we do need to make this a priority of reorganizing those subcommittees. So I would ask you either tonight or tomorrow to send me a 1, 2, 3 prioritized list, if you please could, of the subcommittees where you would prefer to serve for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year, so that I can get those put together and get some subcommittees. I will try to honor everyone's first choices, but that isn't always possible. So in some cases it may be a second choice, and I apologize for that. Any questions about subcommittee assignments? Maureen? Oh, there you go.
So just a quick question for Paul, Lees, and myself, where we are in the midst of negotiating with the teachers. Are we going to remain, or?
That would be my preference, yes. That where there's work in progress, I try to leave as many members of that committee intact, but we obviously know that there does need to be some movement. So, I'll do my best. It's got to be easier than last year. That's all I can say, because last year was a nightmare. I think this year is going to be easier.
Yeah. So I'm happy to stay on PNN with Paul.
Okay.
So I don't know. Do you want me to send you something or no?
No, I would say if you and Mr. Lees are willing to do that, given that we're in the middle, yes. I'm seeing a nod from Paul as well. That
Can I vote
please
too
don't
for
send
that?
me what?
Can I vote too for that? Let's
You
not
may.
change up. No, change that. Yeah.
Yeah, then we'll leave you two and consider that you're asterisked right out of the preference process, and then we'll figure out based on the other responses someone that can join you on that committee.
Okay, thank you.
Subcommittee, yes. Thank you. Any other questions on that? All right, seeing none. Moving on to general action items, draft resolution. So this was a resolution that came through Worcester's school committee. Obviously, we've had a lot of discussion about about testing locally. That's something that Worcester had concerns about as well. They did not tie this to their reopening plan. Obviously, metrics can be handled separately, and that's a discussion that we'll be having, I anticipate, next week. but they passed this resolution just as a non-binding request to the state to ensure that ongoing, easily accessible free testing with a quick turnaround and operation across the state happen before any district brings students back into session. I would request that the committee consider voting this resolution, and I can notify MASC there, like they do with other resolutions, gathering the names of the committees that have adopted them and the dates, and they are taking those to various legislators to kind of confirm the priorities of the overall association. Do I have any amendments to this? Can I get a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Maureen? Can I get a second? Linda?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Can I get a roll call vote then? Erin?
Yes.
Thank you. Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Lees?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Tina?
Yeah.
All right, and I'm a yes as well, so that's 8 yes and 1 abstention, and I will get this signed and off to both our legislators and to MASC so that they have that. Thank you. Moving on to reviewing the 2020-2021 preschool and kindergarten program. Kim, are you taking this, or Brian?
I'm going to continue to share. Everyone's been listening to me for 3 months, so.
All right, Kim is
Kimberly,
up.
you're willing to
Sure.
at least start the discussion?
Yes, I appreciate everybody's patience around the pre-K and kindergarten. So we certainly had a lot of decisions to make over the last few weeks. First, about kindergarten, and kindergarten just being under the umbrella of kind of the high priority kids, just because they are certainly some of our youngest learners who are coming into the building, but we know that those social interactions are so important as they begin to build their foundational skills. So we had decided that they were considered high priority, and because they would be considered high priority, the preschool program would run, but it would be adjusted. It would be adjusted in as far as time, so that the sessions, instead of meeting 2 hours and 45 minutes, almost 3 hours, the sessions would run an hour and a half. So that's the first way that we adjusted it. We shortened the sessions. The second way that we adjusted it is that we have moved preschool outside for the majority of that time, that hour and a half, where the students will be separated 6 feet. They still will be wearing masks. They will be doing activities outside in a way that is appropriate as far as the safety guidelines, but also developmentally appropriate. In addition to being able to hold preschool outside, those students who are transitioning from EI programs or have special needs and need some type of support will be able to access those supports at school very early on, because we know from research and past experience that the earlier you can intervene with students, that the better the outcome is as far as their ability to continue pace with their peers and children in their age group. So that was kind of the reasoning. So also, as they leave after that hour and a half, they will be sent home with activities that will fall under some type of theme that are related to the activities they're doing in person, and they will have their own bucket full of supplies that are necessary to participate in those activities. Those activities will be facilitated or overseen by a parent or a daycare provider outside of school. So we felt like that was a good way to give them the balance of having those really important social interactions with peers and with educators, but also giving them an opportunity to do some self-paced learning with the guidance of an adult. because of the shortened time that they would be there, we have reduced the rates as far as tuition prices, and I believe you were sent that document, and I don't know if Kyle, you want to read through those different adjustments as far as tuition.
Yeah, so I can hit on maybe the theme of the adjustments. So like Kim mentioned previously, the sessions were 2 hours and 45 minutes and now down to an hour and a half. That represents a 45% decrease in the amount of time. Where there are a number of fixed costs built into the program, we couldn't really facilitate a one-for-one reduction in the tuitions. So we proposed a 30% reduction in the tuitions. And so the schedule you see there on that sheet reflects a 30% reduction over the prior year or the existing.
And so in addition to the reduction, just we actually, one thing that we did keep the same is we are still holding the scheduled, that were scheduled in the spring, the preschool screening days. So those will be next week, which I can't believe I'm saying that, next week. And parents are aware of those dates. Those screenings will be outside. They will be with less people involved. So in the past, we've had nurses and specialists and other people do some screening, but this one will be more so just the teacher interviewing the parent, and just one parent will be there with the child. So getting some background information about the child and their development. So I think moving forward, that will give them some baseline to work with. And then as they spend more time with that child, we'll obviously gain better insight into their social and emotional and academic development. So we're happy about that. And then orientation, they're going to have again, an open house. And we're looking at that being almost at the same time of that screening, where they'll be able to look inside the classroom for just a short amount of time, because we do anticipate that the kids will be spending maybe 10 minutes in the classroom in that physical setting, hopefully getting them ready for a transition to hybrid. But we also know that preschoolers do not do well when asked to distance themselves. So we've got some hula hoops, and again, starting that slow transition to get them into the classroom, but even at the start of the year for 10 minutes to just kind of get them acclimated to that setting and to that social distancing, and they each will have their own bucket of supplies. And so there will be some procedures and some rules in place to keep everybody safe. Any questions about preschool before I move on to kindergarten? Okay. Oh.
Hey, Kim, I have a question.
Sure.
For if we end up moving into a hybrid model, I know we've already changed it from the almost 3 hours to 90 minutes and adjusted the tuition accordingly. Is there have you guys talked about increasing the time again? I know, which would, that would obviously change with the numbers. But
for me, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking let's wait to see how the kids do in the situation, and Brian can jump in anytime. Yeah. But, knowing that this is a new situation for preschool students and getting them acclimated just to outside and even 10 minutes to the class to see how they transition or how successful they are, any types of obstacles they need to deal with. But I'd say for me, it's a wait and see. If they're doing well, I would love to increase the time that the preschoolers are there.
Yeah, I think we're looking at it as we're almost implementing hybrid for the preschool right away, right? So they're coming as a reduced schedule. And then when we move into hybrid, as we're going into winter, right? If we're in hybrid in October and we transition to winter, obviously preschool, when it's 10 below outside, is not happening outside. So as we transition, I think the concept was, as Kim said, take it as it goes. I would say in my assumption, I think in our discussions, was in full remote and hybrid, this would be the schedule. If we get to full in person, then I think we would want to reassess, and whether that just means we bring them in and don't adjust tuitions and just figure out how to lose that revenue or whatever for the balance of the year. If we could do that, absolutely do that for families that are able to adjust on the fly. But I think the adjustment would be when we're full in person.
Any other question, Tina? That was it. Any other questions on preschool?
Okay.
All right, seeing none.
So looking at the kindergarten schedule for a full day for a kindergartner, it would be too much screen time for a child, and developmentally it would not be appropriate for a kindergarten, even if we had that balance of asynchronous and synchronous learning. So what the recommendation is that all kindergarten sessions be half-day sessions for everybody across the board. And that would basically eliminate the tuition for the entire year, and that would stay in place all year without moving to a full-day kindergarten. And in that particular situation, they would get all of their kind of academics along with some social and emotional learning at the beginning of the day. And then they would have obviously the afternoon off and be involved in other activities outside of school within their family or community setting. We feel like that is best for kids. We also feel like we can provide them with a solid remote learning to do some pre-literacy and literacy skills. But we definitely feel like having a full day of remote, asynchronous, and synchronous is just not developmentally appropriate for a kindergartner.
I would say, and then on top of that, I don't know that we're, you know, in any of the surveying and questions that were asked of parents, the response was, I can't justify paying a tuition for the kids being at home, right? So as long as we're in full remote or in hybrid, it was a hard conversation. It's a hard argument to make, to say, I know parents are going to be paying for daycare, and they're also going to pay for kindergarten remote on top of that. So I think it's, you know, it starts off as the right thing to do for kids. And then, you know, on top of that, it was just I think we would have landed here because the vast majority would have said, yeah, I'm going to opt out of full day K anyway. So it just made sense to make the change. There would be a couple families that still likely might have desired full day K, but you know, the vast majority, you know, 90 some odd % were saying, no, I'm not going to pay the tuition. So in regards to the staffing, so we are obviously staffed for full day sections. So we are not reducing any individuals. You know, we keep talking about the fact that we know there will be people who are taking leaves. We're moving towards finalizing those by the end of this week. And so we know there will be openings and spaces that need to be filled. And as we hopefully transition into hybrid on October 13th, families that will choose full remote option for their students, for their children, and therefore, you know, we're going to need additional educators to work with those students that are in that, you know, by grade level cohort, remote cohort. So,
So, and as far as screening, we are going to adjust the kindergarten screening dates because we just are not ready at this point. In addition to that, our teachers, the kindergarten teachers, would be missing out on some very important PD that would be happening on those screening days that they really need to be part of. So right now we're looking at the 14th and the 15th to reschedule with parents to bring their kids in. So, Paul, that's your answer for you.
Melissa was asking before we started.
Yeah, when you were out of the room, she was jumping in there. But they will be, parents will be contacted by, I can't believe tomorrow's already Thursday, by tomorrow or Friday after we get the information. We needed to go through the process tonight first to get that out there.
And also there's some details in regards to negotiations that we're hoping to talk to the committee tonight, and then another session tomorrow in regards to some orientation days for students as well. So on those days.
Yeah, that's probably the largest amount of questions that I have fielded are about pre-K and kindergarten, specifically around the screening. So I do understand again, I go back to that word, the frustration of being everything kind of at the last minute, but still not able to share completely what the plan is until we go through the process of negotiating.
And I'll just voice this. The reason that this was late coming to you was because finance subcommittee looked at this earlier today. So I think the general feeling among finance was that that this is something where we believe it wouldn't have such a significant financial impact to the district, that it's not doable. you know, obviously there are plans for offsets and for using those, that staffing in other ways, that would be beneficial based on the much wider variety of services and breadth of services that will need to be provided through the fall. So that has already gone through finance. Questions, Paul Goldner?
Yeah, just if we were to somehow make it back to full in person at some point, would we be possibly talking about bringing that full day kindergarten back at that point, or is this full year all regardless of how we get back?
I would say similar to preschool, if we're back to full in person, unequivocally yes. I'm guessing the vast majority of parents would say, okay, I'm not paying for daycare, I would like to pay for that full day program again. And same with preschool. So yes, we want to get back on track with offering full day K, and back on track with this coming year was supposed to be year one of the, you know, chopping the tuition by a third each year to get down to universal free full day K. So yes, I would say, you know, when we're making the decision to go into hybrid, then as soon as we get in for hybrid, obviously we're gonna have to react if we need to based on data. But as soon as we're in for hybrid, then we're looking at the data to make the next shift in. So yes, we would be looking at timetables, and it would have to be optional, right? So it would be, if we've already assumed the costs and have maintained all of our staffing, another reason why we wouldn't want to reduce teachers and assistants for K. But if we have them and we're keeping them, and if we're coming back in full, yes, the goal would be to unequivocally, yes, put full day K back in.
But full day, I think both preschool and kindergarten, we're talking full day, right, Brian?
Full day K, yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay,
then for
yeah, that's what I
preschool,
meant.
back to the regular.
Full in
the
person,
regular.
yes, yeah.
Yep.
Other questions, Paul? Are you all set? All right, any other questions from the committee? And I'll just voice, there were two concerns I think that came out of this earlier today. One was one that Caitlin had voiced about the drop-offs for preschool for parents or caregivers that also have older children who would be required to be remote simultaneously, and the conflicts that could potentially cause. So that was one, Kim. And then the other one was just a question about meals. When we've done half day K, we traditionally have not served meals to those students or provided any meals to those students. And obviously there could be some that need a meal from the district to be providing a lunch to them.
Yep.
And exploring whether there was a way to make that happen.
Yeah, so Kyle took that one away in regards to we'll work with Lucinda. And I think if you had said, hey, can we provide remote meals and get them to kids last February, I would have been quick to say, gosh, I don't think there's any way possible. But obviously we know Lucinda the Great has figured this all out with all of the cafeteria staff. So I think that's a very easy hurdle in regards to providing lunches for those families that want to purchase them. And obviously if they qualify, free or reduced, providing them for them. We're looking at, I should provide that, you know, update as well, looking to provide meals week at a time and still doing curbside pickup and still looking at transportation and delivery. Again, got to work out all those logistics, but we'll have that in place for the 16th. Back to Caitlin's question. I think I said the options would be, you know, hopefully we could figure it out, or it might be that I come back and say, I don't think there's any way to do it. I don't think if I was giving you an answer right now, and we'll continue to brainstorm, I don't think there's any way we can offset that. Again, the question being, if you've got a second grader and you've got a preschooler and the preschool drop off is 8:30 and that's going to be in person, that's also, you know, the opening connections for the day, which would be a live synchronous opportunity for students. Just in regards to the school day, we would have to alter it so much, right? If you live next door and it was a 5-minute walk over, but we would have to alter the school day so much that I don't think there's a way. Again, maybe it's like remote lunches, and there is a way, but without providing preschool transportation, which would be both, you know, cost prohibitive as well as that's just a whole different level of services that to put in place. The other opportunity or the other solution would be adjusting start time for preschool or for the school, the regular school day. And that obviously we can't do that. So I don't think that's going to be a obstacle we're going to be able to solve.
And I was trying to look today too to see, like Brian said, if we could adjust the schedule. And it's everything that we are doing as far as decisions is almost like a house of cards. If you take one out, the entire house almost tumbles, and there's all these other chain reactions. But looking to see I know there's a closing connections group. So even if the child wasn't able to do the morning, it wouldn't be every single day. It would most likely just be those days. It would either be the Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday and Wednesday and Friday, which is not great, but at least they would still be able to participate in some of those morning connection meetings. But there's also an afternoon connection meeting. And then if it's something that child really needed and the parents thought that it was, we needed to find a way, we would certainly find a way. Even I know we have a couple of minutes that are almost in between when they get there into that early connections meeting, that we would work with the parents to try to get something set up with maybe a few different kids who are in the same situation. And it could be across the district, which is great. It gives us kind of an opportunity for the younger kids to meet friends in other towns. So we're willing to definitely look at some alternative ways to keep those connections in play.
Thank you, Kim. Any other questions on this? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjust the program details and tuitions for both the preschool and full day kindergarten as determined by the committee?
I'll make that motion.
Paul Goldner?
Second.
Is that Erin seconding?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I need a roll call vote. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Abstain.
Paulise?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So that passes 0 and 1. All right, so we already did senior privileges. Moving on to subcommittee reports and action items, policy and advocacy.
Okay, we had a meeting at 5:30, and we're going to look at Annex 2, which is the harassment policy. This policy has pretty much been rewritten by MASC because of all the legal information that is involved with this particular
Linda, are you still there? Not hearing you. Do you want to work on it and I'll talk about it for a second? Or do you want to, are you back?
can you hear me now?
Yes.
There you are.
Excellent.
So I'm not sure how much you heard, but we're going to go over the harassment policy. So pretty much it's been rewritten. The changes that we've made has been just adding our school district. And then we've added Kim Croto as the district's Title IX coordinator. Because of all the legalese, it was easier to adopt MASC's than trying to rewrite ours. Do we vote on these separately, or?
My
do we
preference,
just do
yeah,
them all
would
at
be to
once?
vote on those separately.
Okay. So that's all I have on this, unless Brian has anything more he wants to add to this particular item.
Yeah, I would just add that it's looking at the MASC policy. We did a kind of a side-by-side comparison, and in the packet that was forwarded to the committee and posted, you can see the red and the green shows what was added and deleted. It's a completely different policy, right? So this is definitely the 21st century version of a harassment policy. So this was not a, hey, we'll tweak ours and change this. This was a lock, stock, and barrel complete update and overhaul of our harassment policy. So.
Okay.
Erin,
So
Linda, do you want me to call for a vote, or would you like to call for one?
You can.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve policy ACAB for harassment as a first reading, please?
So
Make
moved.
the motion, and I'll second it.
All right. So go Paul, Linda. Any discussion? All right. I need a roll call vote, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Linda? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Paul Lees. I
I'm
messed
going
up
to
in there.
abstain. I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. All right. Thank you. And Linda, I'll let you move on to the next.
Okay, the next policy is Annex 3. It's the face coverings. We did make some edits from what you were forwarded, and one
I was
of
going to ask,
the,
Narissa, did you forward? I know you were editing as we go.
I did.
I didn't see the final version.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. I thought I sent it to everyone, including you. Let me just double check.
Forgot me.
yeah, I have the final.
You received the final version?
So do I, but I'm trying to figure out if you only sent it to us.
No, I believe it went to everyone. Let me see. Nope. Brian, Kyle, Kim, Paul, Maureen, Tina,
Yeah, I have
Linda, Erin, Caitlin, and Kaylee.
And what was the time?
6:49 p.m.
49. I don't.
All right, there it is. Sorry. Yep, I got it. Sorry. My inbox is a little busy these days.
No doubt.
Sorry, Linda.
So the changes that we made was we said that we wanted a close-fitting face covering, that the face coverings made from mesh or with holes in the fabric, open chin bandana style masks, and any face covering with a valve or vent would not be allowed. Face covering designs must comply with the dress code as outlined in our student handbooks. We also went over when a student is exempt from wearing a mask or face covering, additional steps, including but not limited to physical barriers, increasing distance protocols, and alternative travel patterns for transitions within school buildings. And then we went over the additional face masks or coverings will not be required when appropriate social distance is enforced under the following conditions: during mask breaks, while eating or drinking, during physical education classes in which physical distances of at least 10 feet can be maintained, while engaged in an activity outside in which physical distancing of at least 6 feet, and while a single staff member is alone in an otherwise empty enclosed space, they'll be able to take their mask off. And then a student's mask or face covering is to be provided by the student's family. Staff members will be provided by the district. And if students are in violations of this policy, the student may be removed from the school building for in-person learning, and at such time as they can comply with the requirement of the client or the requirement is lifted. So those were the changes that were made in the face covering that was provided to us by MASC. So I don't know if any of the other policy members have anything to add to that.
I would just add that before the edits were made tonight, and I don't believe any of the edits made tonight substantially changed the kind of legal implications. That I did run this by our counsel, who had obviously said the MASC policy looks good, and we got a little more restrictive. The key question was about our ability to further protect individuals who are not able to wear masks. And obviously there's a fine line there for someone that has a medical exemption from wearing a mask. There's a reason for that, and we need to respect that reason, but we also have an obligation to keep that student and other students around her or him safe. So the language about what we can do to protect that student in the absence of a mask was run by our council, and he believes that it's not unduly burdensome on someone and restricting their rights. Obviously, if we said they need to be in their own room by themselves, obviously that's infringing on their rights, but a little more distancing, barriers and such, we would have the ability to do that to keep those students safe.
I just want to make one other point is I have asked Brian to make, because face coverings is going to be one of the best defenses that we have to protect against this virus, that we send this out to parents for them to sign this. It's going to be imperative that as a community, we all stand by this and everybody wears a mask. So I've just asked him to make sure that this is part of the paperwork that goes out that parents have to sign.
All right. Any comments or questions from the committee? I just have to say I was very pleased to see this policy come through, and very pleased to hear the additional adjustments to it that legal was going to allow us to make. I think this really provides us with the ability to make sure that everyone in our buildings are wearing masks consistently wherever possible, and to take additional measures where it's not possible to wear masks. So I thought that was, I was very encouraged to see that, because I know that was a large worry early on. Can I get a motion to approve as a first reading policy EBCFA, face coverings, as provided?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you, Linda. Can I get a second? Paul Myatt. All right. Any further discussion? I need a roll call vote, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Lees?
Abstain.
Thank you. Linda?
Yes.
Thanks. Paul Myatt?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you for that. And Linda, I know you've got one more.
Yes, this is Annex 4. It's the file EBC supplemental. It's the policy issues for the pandemic. What they did was they're going to have one single policy that amends some of the other policies within our policy manual. And after they lift the pandemic, this one single EBC supplemental file will then go away. So they were just trying to make it as easy as possible, amending the policies without having to go in and amend them once the pandemic is lifted. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Brian.
No, I think that's, there's a series of the policies, and there was a couple minor tweaks. One said it didn't have the language about the superintendent. It basically allows me to make decisions on the fly, right? I mean, a lot of these things are dictating policy where you make decisions. It was the bullet on the second to last page that we made some corrections.
Attendance, JH.
Just the singular JH, right?
Yeah, it was,
third page of Annex 4 of the subcommittee's agenda. So subject to operative law and regulations, the superintendent may. But no, I think it's a good thing to take it as a package, and then when this is all over, because it will end someday, keep reminding people, including myself, that it's rescinding one policy, and then it restores all the policies back to their original intended requirements.
Any questions or comments on this policy? All right, can I get a motion to approve policy EBC supplemental as a first reading, please?
I'll make that motion.
A
second.
Erin. All right, any further discussion? And I need a roll call vote, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paulise?
I'm going to abstain.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
All right, and I'm a yes as well. Thank you very much. And is there anything else for policy, Linda?
Nope, that would be all.
All right. Finance, Tina? There you
All
go.
right. I'm here. So we met today at 1 and reviewed the FY 2020 summary of savings and deficits, the interim report that Kyle put together, which was great. That's estimating that we will end the year at about 80,000 in surplus. And we reviewed the FY21 treasurer's report, as well as the general fund expenditures and revolving accounts, which I don't believe we have in our agendas. I was just looking through.
Not yet. They'll be in, they'll be in the next business meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the other things we discussed is the grant money that we would be getting in from the CARES Act money, the COVID relief fund, the CVRF, and the remote tech grant that we would be getting. Hopeful applying for and the money that's been allotted. So that remote tech grant that would help us with our one-to-one initiative. And we also discussed the update on some of the stadium and track repairs that hopefully we'll be moving forward with. And was there anything else, Narissa or Caitlin, that you guys wanted to add?
Nope, I think that was it. Yeah, perfect. All right, thank you, Tina. Personnel and negotiations. Paul, do you have anything to add before we head into executive session?
I really don't. Just fill you in when we go to executive session.
All right. So the last thing we need to do before we go to executive session is discuss our next meeting date. As I said, I would very much like to meet before September 9th. I feel like meeting the next time being a week before the start of school is late in the process, that we need to have an update in between and potentially have some votes depending on what's available for things like sports and whatnot. I am open to the 2nd, or Paulise had suggested moving it to the 3rd, which is also an option. I actually like that idea because, as Tim said, that's a relatively short time frame for if they're receiving guidance on the 1st and hoping to bring it to us on the night of the 2nd and have a discussion with the CAL in between. So I would request, I guess, responses from the committee as to whether the 3rd, which is a Thursday, would be an agreeable date for the next school committee meeting. Can I get thumbs up, thumbs down? Erin?
7 o'clock?
7 o'clock, yep.
Okay.
And I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Is there anyone that's a thumbs down? Nope. Okay. So I'm going to say let's go for the 3rd at 7 o'clock then. And then we'll also keep September 9th, which is the Wednesday, as the meeting following that. All right. Anything else we need to cover, Brian, before we?
I don't believe so.
All right. Can I get a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of planning for negotiations with union personnel, not to return to open session, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Maureen? Okay. Thank you. All right. I need a roll call vote to go into executive session, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yeah.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paulise?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. All right, thank you very much, and we'll go into executive session, and this full committee will next meet on September 3rd, a Thursday at 7 p.m.